James Chen stared at his phone in disbelief, his fingers scrolling through yet another scathing review of AeroPacific Airlines, his airline. "Worst crew attitude I've ever experienced," the review read. "They treat economy passengers like cattle while fawning over business class." His jaw clenched as he read the 100th similar complaint this month. Something had to change, and he knew exactly how to make it happen. The sleek corner office on the 48th floor of AeroPacific's headquarters in San Francisco usually felt like home to James Chen. Today, it felt suffocating. The wall of windows offering a panoramic view of the bay typically inspired him. Now it only reminded him of how disconnected he'd become from the reality of his airline's operations. James ran his fingers through his salt and pepper hair, his other hand still gripping his smartphone like it was evidence in a crime. At 52, he had spent the last 15 years building AeroPacific from a regional carrier into one of the largest airlines on the West Coast. The company's meteoric rise had been his life's work, but lately something felt off. Mr. Chen, his executive assistant Maya Wang, appeared in the doorway. "The quarterly reports are ready for your review, and the board is expecting your presentation tomorrow." James barely heard her. Instead, he was focused on another customer review that had just popped up on his screen. Flight attendant mocked. "My daughter's anxiety about flying. Never using AeroPacific again." The words burned into his consciousness. "Cancel the board meeting," he said suddenly, looking up at Maya. Her usually composed expression faltered for a moment. "Sir?" "The quarterly review is mandatory and the shareholders reschedule it," James interrupted, standing up from his ergonomic chair. "Something more important has come up." He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching an AeroPacific jet take off from SFO in the distance. "How many customer complaints have we received about crew behavior in the last 3 months?" Maya consulted her tablet, her fingers dancing across the screen. "A 47% increase compared to last quarter, sir. Customer Relations has prepared a detailed report, and what did operations say about it?" "They assured us it's being handled through standard procedures. Additional training modules have been implemented, and—" James turned around, his expression stern. "Standard procedures aren't working, Maya. Every time I bring this up in executive meetings, I get the same response. We're handling it. It's under control. The numbers will improve, but they're not improving, are they?" Maya hesitated before answering truthfully. "No, sir, they're not." James walked back to his desk and picked up a framed photo. A much younger version of himself, standing proudly in front of the first AeroPacific plane 15 years ago. The airline had started with just 3 aircraft and a dream of creating a different kind of flying experience. Somewhere along the way, that dream had gotten lost in spreadsheets, profit margins, and corporate bureaucracy. "My father was a janitor at SFO," James said quietly, still looking at the photo. "He used to tell me stories about how he'd watch passengers rushing through the terminal, some treated like royalty, others like they were invisible. He always said, 'Jimmy, everyone who steps into an airport is starting a journey. They all deserve to be treated with dignity.'" He set the photo down and turned to Maya. "I've forgotten that somewhere along the way." Maya watched her boss carefully, sensing something significant was about to happen. She'd worked with James Chen for 8 years and knew that look in his eyes, the one that appeared just before he made a decision that would shake things up. "I need you to do something for me, Maya, and it needs to stay absolutely confidential." James walked to the small closet in his office where he kept spare clothes for late nights at the office. He pulled out a casual jacket and a pair of jeans. "Book me on every major route we fly over the next month. Economy class. Use my personal credit card, not the corporate one. And use my Chinese name, Jian, not James." Maya's eyes widened as she realized what he was planning. "You're going undercover." The executive reports aren't telling us the real story. The customer complaints are symptoms of a deeper problem, and I need to see it for myself." He paused, a determined look crossing his face. "No one treats our passengers like they're invisible, not on my airline." As Maya began making the arrangements, James felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. He hadn't flown economy in years, and never on his own airline as an unknown passenger, but he knew this was necessary. The next few weeks would show him the truth about AeroPacific, not the polished version presented in boardroom meetings, but the real experience of ordinary passengers. "First flight?" he asked Maya, who was rapidly typing on her tablet. "Tomorrow morning, AP Flight 2547, San Francisco to Seattle, economy seat 28C. She looked up at him. "Are you sure about this?" "Sir." James nodded, already mentally preparing for what lay ahead. Sometimes you have to look at things from a different angle to see them clearly. "Book the flights, Maya. It's time I got to know my own airline again." The next morning arrived with a blanket of San Francisco fog rolling across the bay. Chen stood in front of his bathroom mirror, studying his reflection. Gone was the perfectly tailored suit and designer watch that usually marked him as the owner of AeroPacific Airlines. Instead, he wore faded jeans, a plain grey sweater, and an old pair of running shoes he'd found in the back of his closet. His normally well-styled hair was slightly disheveled, and he'd skipped his morning shave, letting a shadow of stubble soften his usual sharp appearance. "Looking nothing like a CEO," he muttered, adjusting the worn backpack on his shoulder. Another deliberate choice to complete his transformation. The leather briefcase and titanium luggage he typically traveled with remained locked in his office. Today, he was just another passenger trying to make it to Seattle for a business meeting. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Car waiting. Downstairs. Driver knows the protocol." James smiled at his assistant's thoroughness. She'd arranged for a regular rideshare service instead of his usual private car. Another small detail to maintain his cover. The ride to San Francisco International Airport felt different from the passenger seat of a modest sedan. Usually, James would be in the back of a luxury vehicle, reviewing reports or taking calls. Today, he watched the city wake up through rain-speckled windows, observing fellow travelers on their way to the airport, a mother wrestling with car seats in a minivan, a group of young backpackers huddled at a bus stop, a businessman running for a taxi, coffee spilling from his travel mug. These are my real customers, James thought, not just the statistics in quarterly reports. The driver pulled up to Terminal 2, where AeroPacific operated most of its domestic flights. "Have a good flight," he said cheerfully, unloading James's backpack from the trunk. James thanked him, slung the bag over his shoulder, and joined the stream of passengers flowing through the automatic doors. The terminal buzzed with morning energy. James had walked through this space countless times, but always with an entourage of executives or being whisked through VIP channels. Now he stood in line at the economy check-in counter, watching his own employees at work. 2 check-in agents staffed the economy line, a younger woman with bright red hair who seemed overwhelmed by the morning rush, and an older man who barely looked up from his computer as he processed passengers. James noticed how the premium check-in counter had 3 staff members, despite having fewer passengers, and all of them seemed more engaged with their customers. "Next!" the older agent called out. James stepped forward, presenting his ID and confirmation number. The agent, his name tag read Gerald, glanced at the documents with disinterest. "Window or aisle?" Gerald asked, his tone suggesting he'd repeated this question thousands of times. "Window, please," James replied, studying Gerald's face. He recognized him from employee files. 15 years with the airline, consistently. Average performance reviews, 28F, Gerald announced, printing the boarding pass. Gate A7, securities to your left. He was already looking past James to the next passenger before finishing his sentence. James lingered for a moment. Actually, I had a question about... Information desk is by Gate A1, Gerald interrupted, pointing vaguely to his right without looking up. Next! James stepped aside, making a mental note. No greeting, no eye contact, no attempt to help with questions. Was this how all economy passengers were treated? He glanced at the premium check-in counter again, where an agent was warmly chatting with a business-class passenger about local restaurants in Seattle. The security line stretched longer than usual, and James found himself sandwiched between a young family with two restless toddlers and a group of elderly tourists. He watched as premium passengers breezed through the priority lane, some throwing irritated glances at the economy line when a child started crying. "First time flying AeroPacific?" the mother behind him asked, trying to keep her younger child from wandering off. "What makes you say that?" James asked, curious about her perception. She shifted her diaper bag to her other shoulder. "You still look hopeful," she said with a tired smile. "Most regulars know better than to expect much from them these days. My husband and I used to fly AeroPacific all the time, but lately," she shrugged, "the service just isn't what it used to be." James felt a knot form in his stomach. This wasn't just about one bad review or a single rude employee. This was his airline's new reputation, a stark contrast to the vision he'd had when founding AeroPacific. As he finally cleared security and walked toward Gate A7, James observed the morning rush in full swing. Gate agents appeared stressed, barking instructions at passengers who got too close to the counter. A flight attendant hurried past, practically running into an elderly man without stopping to apologize. The premium lounge doors opened occasionally, offering glimpses of a peaceful oasis amid the chaos. James found a seat near his gate, pulling out his phone to check the time. Flight 2547 would begin boarding in 20 minutes. As he waited, he opened the AeroPacific app and navigated to the customer reviews section. The latest one had been posted just hours ago. "They've forgotten what service means. Treat you like a number if you're not in business class." "No," James thought, watching a gate agent snap at a passenger who'd approached with a question. "They've forgotten what people mean." "Now boarding Group A, our premium cabin passengers and AeroPacific Elite members," a sharp voice announced. Over the gate speaker system, James watched as the gate agent, a tall woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a name tag reading Rebecca, welcomed the premium passengers with practiced smiles and personalized greetings. The contrast between her demeanor and what he'd observed earlier was striking. Rebecca's entire body language transformed when dealing with premium passengers. Her shoulders relaxed, her smile reached her eyes, and her voice took on a warm, almost conspiratorial tone as she shared pleasantries with familiar business travelers. James sat in his economy seat, observing the scene while pretending to work on his phone. A distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit approached the podium, and Rebecca's face lit up with recognition. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison. Your usual seat in 2A is ready for you. How was your golf game in Phoenix last week?" The familiarity of their interaction made James wonder how many similar relationships his premium cabin crew had developed, while economy passengers remained faceless. Numbers. His attention was drawn to a young woman attempting to approach the counter with a question, only to be waved away with a curt, "Please wait for your group to be called." As the premium cabin filled, James noticed something odd. A flight attendant, her name tag identified her as Sarah Mitchell, was providing what appeared to be excessive attention to the premium cabin passengers. She helped store bags that these clearly capable business travelers could have managed themselves, offered pre-flight beverages with elaborate flourishes, and engaged in lengthy conversations about wine selections. Then came the economy boarding announcement, delivered in a noticeably less enthusiastic tone. Now boarding Group B, rows 1530. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Rebecca's smile became fixed and mechanical, her gestures more perfunctory. Sarah, who had been so attentive in first class, disappeared entirely. James stood up, shouldering his worn backpack. As he approached the gate, he noticed an elderly couple struggling with their carry-on bags just ahead of him. The husband used a cane, making it difficult to manage their luggage. James expected Sarah or another crew member to offer assistance, but none appeared. When he reached the front of the line, Rebecca barely glanced at his boarding pass before attempting to wave him through. However, James paused, gesturing to the elderly couple behind him. "Excuse me, but is there someone who could help them with their bags?" Rebecca's expression tightened. "Sir, we need to keep the line moving. If passengers require special assistance, they should request it in advance." "But they're right here now, and they clearly need help," James persisted, keeping his tone polite but firm. "Sir," Rebecca's voice took on an edge of irritation, "if you're not ready to board, please step aside for other passengers." At that moment, Sarah emerged from the jet bridge, scrolling through her phone. James called out to her, "Excuse me, would you mind helping this couple with their bags?" Sarah looked up, first at James, her expression dismissive as she took in his casual attire, then at the elderly couple. She sighed audibly. "I'm actually needed in the premium cabin right now. Perhaps another passenger could assist." She turned away without waiting for a response, disappearing back down the jet bridge. James felt his jaw tighten. The same flight attendant who had spent 10 minutes discussing wine vintages with a business-class passenger couldn't spare 30 seconds to help an elderly couple with their bags. He turned to the couple himself. "Let me help you with those." As he helped them manage their luggage, he could hear Rebecca's exasperated sighs behind him. "Sir, you're holding up the line. Either board now or step aside." "Yes, sir. Actually," James straightened up, meeting Rebecca's gaze, "I believe AeroPacific's mission statement includes ensuring every passenger's journey begins with dignity. Isn't that right?" Rebecca blinked, thrown off by his specific knowledge of company policy. Yes, but then shouldn't that apply to all passengers, regardless of their ticket class?" The gate area had grown quiet, other passengers watching the exchange with interest. Rebecca's face flushed slightly. "Sir, if you have a complaint, you're welcome to submit it through our customer service channel. Right now, we need to complete boarding." James nodded slowly, helping the elderly couple gather their belongings. "You'll find out soon enough that I have a more direct channel for my complaints." He kept his voice low enough that only Rebecca could hear him, leaving her looking uncertain as he made his way down the jet bridge. As he walked toward the aircraft, James's mind was racing. The incident had confirmed his worst fears. The disparity in service wasn't just about resource allocation or training gaps. It was about a fundamental shift in culture, where the value of a passenger was determined solely by their ticket class. Entering the aircraft, he was met by Sarah's barely concealed look of annoyance. She had clearly been informed about the delay he'd caused at the gate. James made his way to his seat in row 28, helping the elderly couple store their bags in the overhead compartment before settling in. From his window seat, he watched as more economy passengers filed past Sarah, who had resumed her phone scrolling, barely acknowledging their existence. "Thank you for your help, young man," the elderly gentleman said, as he and his wife took their seats across the aisle. "Not many people would take the time these days." James smiled warmly at them. "It was my pleasure. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect." He emphasized the last word slightly, noting that Sarah was within earshot. She shifted uncomfortably, but maintained her disinterested expression. As the final passengers boarded, James pulled out his phone one last time before the door closed. He opened his notes app and began typing. "Day 1, Immediate issues identified: premium versus economy service disparity, staff indifference, lack of basic assistance, mission statement violations. He paused, then added, critical observation. The problem isn't just about service, it's about seeing people as human beings. D. As Flight 2547 reached cruising altitude, James settled into his window seat, maintaining the perfect vantage point to observe the crew's interactions with passengers. The cabin's atmosphere had shifted noticeably since takeoff. The sound of ice clinking in premium cabin cocktail glasses filtered back through the thin curtain divider, accompanied by Sarah's melodious laughter as she chatted with the business travelers. In economy, a different scene unfolded. A second flight attendant, whose name tag read Kevin, moved through the aisle with mechanical efficiency, his interactions with passengers limited to terse questions. Beverage? Ice? Pretzels? Most responses were met with a wordless nod as he moved to the next row. James watched as a young mother struggled to calm her infant a few rows ahead. The baby's cries grew increasingly distressed, and several passengers shot irritated glances in their direction. The mother's face flushed with embarrassment as she tried to retrieve a bottle from her diaper bag while holding her child. Kevin passed by without acknowledging her situation. Moments later, Sarah emerged from the premium cabin, and the mother called out softly, "Excuse me, could you please—" "I'll have someone assist you shortly," Sarah interrupted, barely breaking stride as she returned to the front of the plane. The mother's shoulders slumped in defeat. James unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, making his way to the mother's row. "Here, let me hold your little one while you get what you need," he offered quietly. The mother's eyes filled with grateful tears as she handed him the baby, quickly retrieving the bottle from her bag. "Thank you," she whispered, taking her child back. "I've been flying back and forth between Seattle and San Francisco for my job training, and it's been—" She trailed off, glancing toward the flight attendants. "Challenging?" James supplied, noting how Sarah was now demonstrating wine options to a premium passenger while Kevin remained out of sight. "They used to be different," the mother continued, testing the bottle's temperature. "I remember flying AeroPacific years ago. The crew would go out of their way to help passengers with children. Now it feels like we're an inconvenience unless we're sitting up front." James returned to his seat, his mind racing. This wasn't just about one flight or a few indifferent crew members. The airline's entire culture had shifted away from its founding principles. He recalled the company's original training manual, which he'd written himself. "Every passenger's comfort is our priority, regardless of their seat assignment." A commotion near the back of the cabin drew his attention. An elderly passenger was experiencing motion sickness, and his wife was trying to get the attention of any crew member. Kevin eventually appeared, looking annoyed at the interruption of his galley duties. "Sir, please try to make it to the lavatory if you're feeling unwell," Kevin stated flatly, offering no assistance or sympathy. The man's wife spoke up. "Could we please get some ginger ale and maybe an air sickness bag?" Kevin's response was barely audible. "We're past the beverage service. There are bags in your seat pocket." He turned away, leaving the couple to manage on their own. James watched as nearby passengers began offering help, sharing crackers, finding air sickness bags, offering words of comfort. The contrast between the crew's indifference and the passengers' humanity was stark and troubling. In the galley, he could overhear Sarah and Kevin talking during a quiet moment. Their voices carried just enough for him to catch snippets of their conversation. "Premium cabin's so much better today," Sarah was saying. "Did you see the guy in 2A? He's on the board of some tech company. These are the passengers we need to focus on. They're the ones who matter." Kevin's response was equally telling. "Tell me about it. Economy's just a headache. Crying babies, constant demands, people who don't even know proper flight etiquette. I've requested premium-only rotations starting next month." James pulled out his phone again, adding to his notes, "Crew actively seeking to avoid economy service. Premium cabin prioritized to extreme, basic compassion lacking, immediate intervention needed. A bout of turbulence interrupted his note-taking. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a gentle ding, and Captain Martinez's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting some rough air for the next few minutes. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." James watched as Sarah rushed to secure the premium cabin, checking each passenger individually and offering reassurance. In economy, Kevin merely walked through once, barking, "Seatbelts," before returning to the galley. The elderly couple he'd helped earlier caught his attention again. The husband was attempting to reach something that had fallen during the turbulence, struggling with his cane. James was about to get up to help when he heard the wife say something that made his heart sink. "Remember when AeroPacific used to advertise themselves as the caring way to fly? Your father would have been so disappointed to see what it's become." James froze. She couldn't have known she was speaking to the son of the man she was referencing. His father, who had spent years working at SFO, dreaming of an airline that treated everyone with dignity. The comment struck deeper than any customer complaint. He'd read. As the turbulence subsided, James watched Sarah emerge once again, this time with fresh hot towels for the premium cabin. The disparity in service had moved beyond mere business strategy. It had become a cultural erosion that threatened everything AeroPacific was meant to represent. The flight was approaching its midpoint when a situation began to unfold that would prove to be the tipping point. James noticed a young man in his early 20s, seated a few rows ahead, repeatedly pressing his call button. The passenger wore a worn Stanford University sweatshirt and kept checking his phone with increasing anxiety. Kevin's voice crackled over the intercom. "Reminder to all passengers that the call button should only be used for urgent matters." His tone carried an unmistakable note of irritation. Still, the call button remained unanswered. After 5 minutes, the young man raised his hand, trying to catch any flight attendant's attention as they passed. Sarah breezed by without acknowledging him, disappearing behind the premium cabin curtain. Kevin emerged from the galley, saw the illuminated call button, and visibly sighed before approaching. "Sir, as I announced, the call button is for emergencies. Only," Kevin stated, reaching to turn off the light without asking the passenger's needs. "Please," the young man's voice trembled slightly. "I'm a diabetic, and I need to check if you have any juice. My blood sugar is dropping and my glucose tablets aren't in my bag. I think they got gate-checked." Kevin's expression remained impassive. "The beverage service is complete. We have water available." James felt his chest tighten. He knew AeroPacific's policy manual by heart. There were supposed to be juice boxes specifically stored for medical emergencies like this. The young man's voice grew more urgent. "Water won't help. I really need something with sugar, please. It's a medical situation." "Sir, if you have a medical condition, you should come prepared," Kevin responded, his tone carrying a hint of condescension. "We can't make exceptions to our service schedule for every passenger who forgets their supplies." A woman across the aisle spoke up. "I have a Snickers bar in my purse, if that would help." The young man nodded gratefully, but James had seen enough. He stood up, his movement deliberate and purposeful. "Excuse me," James addressed Kevin, keeping his voice steady but firm. "According to FAA regulations and AeroPacific's own policy, Manual, Section 5.3.2, all aircraft are required to maintain a supply of juice or glucose supplements specifically for diabetic emergencies. They should be stored in the forward galley, top right compartment, clearly marked with a red medical tag." Kevin's expression shifted from dismissive to uncertain. "Sir, I don't know how you would know about—" "I suggest you check that compartment." "Now," James interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument, "this passenger's medical need constitutes exactly the type of emergency the call button is meant for." Sarah had emerged from the premium cabin, drawn by the commotion. She approached with a forced smile. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," James replied, turning to face her. "This passenger is experiencing a diabetic episode, and instead of receiving immediate assistance, he's being lectured about call button etiquette. Would this be happening if he were seated in 2A? Sarah's professional mask slipped for a moment, revealing genuine discomfort. "I'll check the galley," she said quickly, disappearing behind the curtain. She returned moments later with 2 small cans of apple juice, handing them to the young man without meeting anyone's eyes. As the passenger gratefully accepted the juice, James noticed other travelers watching the scene intently. The elderly couple from earlier exchanged knowing looks. The young mother he'd helped was shaking her head sadly. Even some premium cabin passengers had pulled back the curtain to observe the commotion. "Thank you," the young man said, after drinking some juice, his color already improving. "I was getting really scared. I've flown AeroPacific dozens of times for my medical treatments at Stanford, but lately—" He trailed off, glancing at the flight attendants. James sat down next to him, ignoring Kevin and Sarah's uncomfortable hovering. "How long have you been making this trip?" 3 years, the young man replied. "I'm part of a clinical trial for type 1 diabetes. Used to be different on these flights. The crew would check on me, keep extra juice handy. Some even remembered my name. Now it feels like I'm just another inconvenience." James noticed Sarah shift uncomfortably at these words. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, retreating to the galley. Kevin remained rooted to the spot, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by an uncertain expression. A businessman from the premium cabin approached, having witnessed the entire scene. "Excuse me," he addressed Kevin, his voice carrying the authority of a frequent first-class traveler. "I'd like to speak to the lead flight attendant. This situation was handled unacceptably." Kevin stammered. "Sir, we followed—" "You followed nothing," the businessman interrupted. "I fly this route every week, and I've never seen such a lack of basic human compassion. The gentleman is right. This would never have happened in premium class. That's not just poor service, it's discrimination." James watched as the scene unfolded, noting how quickly the crew's demeanor changed when faced with criticism from a premium passenger. Sarah reappeared, attempting to smooth things over with practiced diplomatic phrases, but the damage was done. The incident had cracked the carefully maintained facade of professional service, revealing the rot beneath. It wasn't just about missing glucose supplies or ignored call buttons. It was about an airline that had lost its way, where the basic dignity of passengers had become tied to their ticket class. James pulled out his phone one final time, adding to his notes. "Critical incident, diabetic passenger, medical supplies available, but withheld. Crew untrained, unwilling to follow emergency protocols. Premium passenger intervention required for action. Complete cultural overhaul needed immediately." In the aftermath of the diabetic passenger incident, the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted noticeably. Passengers exchanged knowing looks, and hushed conversations about declining service standards rippled through the economy section. James watched as Sarah and Kevin retreated to the galley, their body language tense and defensive. Through the small gap between seats, he could see them engaged in an animated discussion. Sarah gestured frantically while Kevin leaned against the counter, arms crossed. James adjusted his position slightly, allowing their whispered conversation to reach him. "This is exactly why I hate economy routes," Sarah hissed, organizing cups on her cart with more force than necessary. "They're always demanding something outside of service times, acting like we're supposed to be their personal attendants." Kevin glanced nervously toward the cabin. That guy, though, the one in 28F, how did he know about the medical supply protocols? Even I didn't know exactly where that stuff was stored. Sudi, probably some airline blogger or one of those aviation enthusiasts who memorize safety manuals for fun, Sarah dismissed, but her voice carried a note of uncertainty. What matters is we can't let them think they can just demand things whenever they want. Premium passengers understand protocol. They respect our time. A third flight attendant joined them in the galley, a younger woman named Jennifer who had been quietly serving the middle section of the plane. "Maybe we should rethink how we're handling things," she suggested softly. "That diabetic passenger could have been in serious trouble." Sarah turned on her sharply. "Don't tell me you're buying into this. Look, I've been flying this route for 8 years. You know what happens when you give economy passengers an inch? They take a mile. Next thing you know, they're all claiming medical emergencies just to get extra attention." James felt his jaw clench at these words. He'd heard enough to understand, and that the problem ran deeper than he'd initially thought. This wasn't just about following procedures, it was about fundamental assumptions about human worth based on ticket class. Jennifer's voice rose slightly. "But what about our training? Remember orientation, where they taught us about AeroPacific's founding principles, about treating every passenger with dignity?" "That's ancient history," Kevin scoffed. "Corporate wants numbers now. Premium cabin satisfaction scores, upsell statistics, loyalty program conversions. When's the last time you saw anyone from headquarters actually fly economy?" The irony of his statement wasn't lost on James, who continued to listen intently. "Besides," Sarah added, lowering her voice further, "you weren't here in the golden days. Back when Mr. Chen first started the airline, sure, it was all about every passenger matters and dignity in the skies. But times have changed. Premium passengers keep the airline profitable. They're the ones who matter to the bottom line." James pulled out his notebook again, jotting down their words verbatim. The mention of his name and the airline's early days sent a wave of sadness through him. How had his vision become so distorted? Jennifer wasn't backing down. "But that passenger in 28F was right. We do have protocols for medical emergencies. And honestly, I've noticed more complaints lately. Last week, a passenger wrote a detailed letter about how we treated her elderly father." "Letters get filed away," Sarah interrupted. "Premium cabin surveys go straight to corporate. That's what affects our performance reviews, our route assignments, everything. Why do you think I requested permanent premium cabin rotation?" The conversation was interrupted by a call button from the premium cabin. Sarah immediately straightened her uniform, plastered on a smile, and headed forward. "Remember," she whispered to Jennifer, "focus on the passengers who actually appreciate our service." Kevin followed Sarah, leaving Jennifer alone in the galley. James watched as the young flight attendant stood there for a moment, conflict evident on her face. She then began pulling out juice boxes from the medical supply compartment, quietly placing one in the seatback pocket of every passenger who had a medical card noted on their ticket, something that should have been done during pre-flight preparations. James made another note. "Some staff remember our values, need to identify and empower them during restructuring." The remainder of the flight service continued with a clear divide in attention and care. Sarah and Kevin focused almost exclusively on the premium cabin, while Jennifer did her best to provide attentive service to everyone, though she was clearly overwhelmed trying to manage alone. James observed as Jennifer stopped to help an elderly passenger with his crossword puzzle, offered extra crackers to a hungry child, and checked on the diabetic passenger regularly. Her actions stood in stark contrast to her colleague's selective service model. As the flight progressed, more passengers began to notice the disparity. A businessman from premium class who had witnessed the earlier incident actually removed his tie and jacket, came back to economy, and spent 20 minutes helping the elderly couple organize their connection information, doing the job the crew should have been doing. The scene crystallized everything James had observed. The airline's culture had created an artificial hierarchy that went against the very principles he'd founded it upon. but it had also shown him something crucial. There were still people, both crew and passengers, who remembered and valued what AeroPacific was meant to represent. As Flight 2547 began its initial descent into Seattle, the cabin crew started their landing preparations. Through the window, James could see the scattered clouds breaking apart to reveal glimpses of Puget Sound below. The sight normally filled him with pride, another AeroPacific flight safely carrying hundreds of passengers to their destination. Today, it filled him with resolution about the changes needed. The seatbelt sign chimed on, and Captain Martinez's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Weather at our destination is partly cloudy, temperature 62 degrees. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival." James watched as Sarah emerged from the premium cabin, where she'd spent almost the entire flight. She moved through economy now with mechanical efficiency, barely glancing at passengers, as she verified their seatbelts and tray tables. Behind her, Kevin performed the same checks with equal detachment, while Jennifer followed, offering genuine assistance to those struggling with bags or electronic devices. A commotion near the front of economy caught James's attention. The mother, with the infant he'd helped earlier, was trying to calm her crying baby, while simultaneously attempting to store her diaper bag. Sarah walked past without acknowledging her struggle, but the businessman from premium class, who had remained in economy after helping the elderly couple, stepped in. "Here, let me help," he offered, properly storing the bag while the mother soothed her child. He turned to Sarah, who was pretending not to notice. "Excuse me, could we get some warm water for the baby's bottle?" Sarah's response was curt. "We're preparing for landing. All services are suspended." The businessman's expression hardened. "It's water for an infant. Surely that's a reasonable request. Sir, please return to your assigned seat in premium class. FAA regulations require—" "FAA regulations," James spoke up, unable to remain silent, "permit flight attendants to provide essential services during descent, especially for passengers with special needs, including infants. It's in the same manual that covers medical emergency protocols." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she turned to face him. "Sir, this is the second time you've questioned our procedures. I don't know where you're getting your information, but I wrote those procedures," James stated quietly, maintaining eye contact. 15 years ago, when I founded this airline." The color drained from Sarah's face as realization dawned. Kevin, who had been approaching to support his colleague, stopped mid-stride. Jennifer, who had been helping an elderly passenger with his oxygen tank, looked up with wide eyes. Mr. Chen," Sarah stammered, her professional demeanor crumbling. "Yes," James confirmed, keeping his voice low to avoid drawing attention from other passengers. "And I'd very much like that warm water for the baby's bottle, please." Sarah practically ran to the galley, returning moments later with the water. The mother, unaware of what had just transpired, thanked her warmly. Sarah managed a weak smile before retreating to the front of the plane, whispering urgently to Kevin. The businessman who had helped earlier leaned across the aisle toward James. "James Chen, the founder of AeroPacific?" James nodded slightly. "I appreciate your kindness today. You've shown more of the spirit this airline was founded on than some of our own staff." "I've been flying AeroPacific since the beginning," the man replied. "I remember when every flight felt like this. Passengers and crew helping each other, genuine care regardless of ticket class. What happened?" "That's exactly what I'm here to find out," James answered, watching as Jennifer continued her attentive service despite the obvious tension among the crew. "And to fix." The plane descended through a layer of clouds, the cabin quiet except for the hum of engines and the occasional cry of the now settling baby. James could see Sarah and Kevin in the galley, their body language conveying panic as they whispered frantically to each other. Jennifer, meanwhile, continued her duties professionally, though she kept glancing in James's direction with a mixture of curiosity and hope. As the aircraft made its final approach, James reflected on everything he'd witnessed. The airline he'd built with dreams of revolutionary service had become exactly what he'd fought against, an environment where a passenger's worth was measured by their ticket class, where basic human dignity had become a premium perk. The wheels touched down on Seattle's runway, and Captain Martinez's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Local time is 11:42 a.m. On behalf of AeroPacific Airlines and this crew, thank you for flying with us today." James knew the real work was about to begin. The notes in his phone detailed every incident, every conversation, every moment that illustrated how far his airline had strayed from its mission. But he'd also seen hope. In Jennifer's dedication, in passengers helping each other, in the small acts of kindness that had occurred despite, not because of, the airline's current culture. As the plane taxied to the gate, he made one final note: AeroPacific needs more than policy changes. It needs a return to its soul. As passengers began to gather their belongings, the atmosphere in the aircraft had transformed. Word of Chen's presence had spread through whispered conversations and meaningful glances. Sarah and Kevin remained near the front of the plane, their earlier confidence replaced by visible anxiety. Jennifer, however, continued her duties, with renewed purpose, helping passengers retrieve their bags from the overhead compartments. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah's voice wavered slightly over the intercom, "please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the captain turns off." The fasten seatbelt sign. The standard announcement carried none of her usual polish. James stayed in his seat, observing the final moments of the flight. The elderly couple across the aisle were gathering their belongings when the husband's cane slipped to the floor. Before Jennifer could reach them, the diabetic passenger from earlier retrieved it, sparking a conversation about their shared experiences on AeroPacific flights. "Used to be my favorite airline," the elderly man said, loud enough for the crew to hear. "Flew it back when Mr. Chen first started it. Every flight felt like you were part of a family." "Things change, I guess," the young man replied, checking his blood sugar one last time. "At least some people still care." He smiled at Jennifer, who was now helping another passenger with a heavy bag. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and passengers began to rise. James remained seated, making final notes on his phone while watching the crew's behavior. Sarah had positioned herself by the premium cabin exit, leaving Kevin and Jennifer to manage the economy deplaning. The division of labor spoke volumes. As the cabin slowly emptied, James finally stood, retrieving his worn backpack from the overhead bin. He made his way forward slowly, stopping to thank the businessman who had helped throughout the flight. "I meant what I said earlier," James told him. "You showed the spirit of what AeroPacific should be." The businessman handed him a business card. "David Parker, frequent flyer since 2010. If you're serious about fixing things, I'd be happy to share my observations from hundreds of flights." James pocketed the card, then turned to the elderly couple who were waiting to deplane. "I hope you'll give us another chance," he said softly. "Things will be different." "You sound just like your father," the woman replied, surprising him. "I worked at SFO coffee shop for 20 years. Your father used to talk about you and your dreams for this airline every morning over his coffee. He'd be proud you're fighting to keep those dreams alive." James felt his throat tighten with emotion. He helped them gather their remaining belongings, then made his way to the front of the aircraft. Sarah and Kevin stood rigid by the exit, while Jennifer watched from the galley with apprehension. "Ms. Mitchell," James addressed Sarah formally. "Mr. Torres." Kevin barely met his eyes. "Ms. Wu." Jennifer stepped forward, standing straighter. "Sir, I can explain," Sarah began, but James held up his hand. I think I've seen enough today to understand the situation, he said calmly. But I'd like all three of you to join me for a discussion, now. The remaining passengers had deplaned, leaving just the crew and James in the aircraft. He gestured to the first row of seats. Please, sit down. As they settled into the premium cabin seats, the irony not lost on anyone, James remained standing, looking at each crew member in turn. When I started AeroPacific, he began, I had a simple vision. Every passenger, regardless of their ticket class, would be treated with dignity and respect. Today, I witnessed something very different. Sarah started to speak again, but James continued. I saw passengers being ignored because they weren't in premium class. I saw medical emergencies being dismissed. I saw basic human kindness being treated as an inconvenience. He turned to Jennifer, but I also saw hope. Ms. Wu, you demonstrated exactly what AeroPacific service should be: attentive, compassionate, and consistent, regardless of where a passenger is seated. Jennifer's eyes glistened with tears. Thank you, sir. I just tried to do what our training manual taught us, what you wrote about treating every passenger like family. That manual, James said, pulling out his phone, seems to have been forgotten by some. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Torres, would you like to explain why you told Ms. Wu that corporate only cares about premium cabin satisfaction scores? Both flight attendants shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Kevin spoke first, his voice barely audible. It's what we were told in our last performance review. Premium cabin metrics are everything. Our route assignments, our schedules, our future. With the airline, and who told you this? Regional Service Director Matthews, Sarah admitted. He said the airline's future depends on premium passenger loyalty. That economy class is just overhead. James's expression hardened. I see. Well, I can assure you that Director Matthews will be having his own conversation very soon, but right now I want to focus on this flight. The aircraft had grown quiet, with only the gentle hum of auxiliary power breaking the silence. Through the windows, ground crew members moved efficiently around the plane, unaware of the intense conversation taking place inside. James pulled down the window shades in the premium cabin, creating a more intimate atmosphere for what needed to be said. Let me tell you a story, he began, settling into a seat across from the three flight attendants. 15 years ago, I was a passenger on a different airline, flying economy from Hong Kong to San Francisco. The woman next to me was traveling with her elderly mother, who became seriously ill during the flight. The crew's response? They told her to wait until landing, because she hadn't paid for business class service. Sarah and Kevin exchanged uncomfortable glances, seeing their own recent behavior reflected in the story. That incident changed my life, James continued. I decided then that if I ever had the chance to create an airline, it would be different. Every passenger would matter. Every journey would be treated with equal importance. That was the foundation of AeroPacific. Jennifer leaned forward slightly, engrossed in the history of the company she'd come to love. Sarah stared at her hands, while Kevin seemed to be struggling with internal conflict. Sir, Sarah finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. We were trained to prioritize premium cabin service. Our evaluations, our career advancement, everything depends on how well we satisfy premium passengers. And how did that training make you feel? James asked, his tone genuinely curious. Sarah looked up, surprised by the question. At first, it felt wrong. We all joined AeroPacific because of its reputation for caring about every passenger. But then the metrics changed, the pressure increased, and somehow... She trailed off. Somehow, Kevin completed her thought, we started seeing passengers as categories instead of people. Exactly, James nodded. But tell me, Ms. Wu, He turned to Jennifer. You're newer to the airline, correct? You went through the same training, faced the same pressure. Why did you choose to maintain consistent service throughout the cabin? Jennifer straightened in her seat. During orientation, we watched a video about the airline's founding. You spoke about your father's experience as an airport janitor, about dignity in air travel. It stuck with me. When the pressure came to prioritize premium service, it just felt wrong to ignore those principles. James smiled slightly. That video was removed from training materials 3 years ago. Director Matthews claimed it was outdated. I know, Jennifer replied. I downloaded it to my phone before they removed it. I watch it sometimes to remind myself why I chose this career. The admission hung in the air for a moment. Sarah and Gavin looked at their younger colleague with newfound respect. Today's flight, James continued, showed me exactly how far we've strayed from our mission. A diabetic passenger was denied basic medical assistance. An elderly couple was ignored. A mother with an infant was treated as an inconvenience, and all because they weren't sitting in the right seats. He pulled out his phone, opening his notes. But it also showed me something else. It showed me that our original spirit still exists. Ms. Wu demonstrated it. That businessman in premium class who helped economy passengers showed it. Even passengers helping each other showed what AeroPacific was meant to be. Standing up, James walked to the galley and returned with 4 cups of water, serving each flight attendant before taking his own, a small gesture that spoke volumes. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his tone firm but not unkind. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling an emergency board meeting. Director Matthews and several other executives will be asked to explain why they've systematically dismantled everything this airline stands for. Sarah and Kevin exchanged nervous glances. As for the 3 of you, James continued, I'm not here to end careers. I'm here to rebuild our airline's soul. Ms. Wu, I'd like you to join our training development team. We need your perspective as we revise our service protocols. Jennifer's eyes widened in surprise. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Torres. James turned to the other 2 flight attendants. You have a choice to make. You can either be part of rebuilding AeroPacific's culture of care, or you can continue on the path you're on. But understand that path will no longer be rewarded here. What exactly are you asking of us? Kevin inquired, his voice steadier than before. I'm asking you to remember why you chose this career. To recall your first days at AeroPacific, before metrics and classifications became more important than people. I'm asking you to help me restore what we've lost. The Seattle airport terminal buzzed with its usual afternoon energy as James emerged from the jet bridge, followed by the 3 flight attendants. The contrast between the intense conversation they'd just had and the normal bustle of airport, life was stark. Passengers from their flight were still dispersing through the terminal, some glancing back curiously at the group. Mr. Chen, Sarah spoke up as they walked, her voice carrying a new note of determination. I want to stay. I want to be part of the change. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Today made me realize how far I've drifted from why I became a flight attendant in the first place. Kevin nodded in agreement. Me too. Watching Jennifer today, seeing how passengers responded to genuine care. It reminded me of my first year here, before everything became about metrics and cabin class. James stopped walking, turning to face them. They had reached a quiet corner of the terminal, away from the main flow of traffic. Through the large windows, their aircraft was visible, the AeroPacific logo gleaming in the afternoon sun. I appreciate your willingness to change, James said, but I need you to understand, this won't be easy. We're not just talking about adjusting service procedures. We're talking about completely rebuilding our culture. He pulled out his phone and opened his email, showing them a message he'd just sent to his executive assistant. Maya, emergency board meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. Topic: complete operational overhaul. Also, please pull all service satisfaction data from the past 5 years, broken down by cabin class and route, and get me Director Matthews's complete policy change history. Jennifer, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Sir, what exactly will this overhaul look like? James smiled, recognizing the same passion for service excellence that had drawn him to the airline industry. First, we're eliminating the separate performance metrics for premium and economy cabins. From now on, there's only one standard of service. Excellent, regardless of seat assignment. He continued, second, we're bringing back the original training programs with some updates. Jennifer, that video you saved? It's going to be the cornerstone of our new orientation, but this time we're adding real experiences, real stories. Sarah's eyes widened. Like what happened today with the diabetic passenger? Exactly, James nodded. Both the failures and the successes. Future crews need to understand what happens when we lose sight of our values, and what's possible when we maintain them. A ground crew member approached them, recognition dawning on his face as he realized who James was. Mr. Chen? Sir, we weren't expecting you. It's all right, James assured him, but I need you to do something for me. Could you gather all ground staff currently working our gates? Meet us in the staff room in 15 minutes. As the crew member hurried off, Kevin looked confused. Sir? Change starts now, James explained, not just with flight crews, but with every employee who impacts our passengers' experience. Ground staff, gate agents, baggage handlers, everyone needs to understand we're returning to our roots. His phone buzzed with a response from Maya. Board meetings scheduled, all materials being prepared. Also, sir, social media is already picking up on your flight today. Several passengers have posted about their experience. James showed them one of the posts. Just witnessed something amazing on AeroPacific flight. Owner James Chen flew economy, exposed service issues, stood up for passengers. Changes coming. Dadun customer service. Dadun leadership. We're going to use this momentum, he told the crew. Sometimes it takes a shock to the system to create real change. Today's flight exposed problems we can't ignore anymore, but it also showed us the solution, returning to the values that built this airline. They reached the staff room, where ground crew members were already gathering, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. James turned to Sarah and Kevin. This is your first test, he said quietly. Share what you learned today. Help them understand why we need to change and how we're going to do it together. Sarah stepped forward, her posture straightening with purpose. When I started at AeroPacific, she began, addressing the room, Mr. Chen's father's story about dignity in air travel inspired me. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. Today showed me what we've become and, more importantly, what we need to be again. Kevin joined her, his voice steady. We've been dividing passengers into categories, treating some as more valuable than others. That ends now. Every passenger who chooses AeroPacific deserves our best, regardless of their seat assignment. James watched with pride as his crew took the first steps toward transformation. His phone continued to buzz with messages from Maya about tomorrow's board meeting, but he knew the real change was already beginning right here in this staff room. Jennifer stepped up beside him. They're really getting it, aren't they? Yes, James nodded, watching as Sarah and Kevin engaged with the ground crew, sharing specific examples from the flight. This is how we rebuild. One conversation, one realization, one change at a time. The next morning dawned clear and bright over San Francisco as James Chen strode into AeroPacific's headquarters. The lobby was abuzz with unusual energy. News of his undercover flight had spread rapidly through the company. Employees whispered and pointed as he passed, but James noticed something else in their expressions. Hope. Maya met him at the elevator, tablet in hand, already briefing him, as they ascended to the executive floor. The board members are all here, including those calling in from international offices. Director Matthews arrived early, looking rather nervous. "And sir," she paused, showing him her tablet, "you might want to see this." The screen displayed multiple social media posts about yesterday's flight. The diabetic passenger had shared his story. "Yesterday I witnessed leadership in action. AeroPacific's owner showed us what airline service should be. Return to care. AeroPacific transformation." The businessman who had helped in economy class had posted a lengthy LinkedIn article about his experience. "In 15 years of business travel, I've never seen a CEO so committed to understanding and fixing customer service issues. This is how you rebuild a company's soul." Even the elderly couple had been interviewed by a local Seattle news station. "We remember when AeroPacific was about making every passenger feel valued. Yesterday, we saw that spirit coming back." The press is requesting statements, Maya continued as they reached the top floor, "and our customer service lines are flooded with people sharing similar experiences, all hoping this means change is coming." James adjusted his tie, pausing before the boardroom doors. "It's not just coming, Maya, it's here." The boardroom fell silent as James entered. Director Matthews sat rigidly in his chair, while other executives shifted uncomfortably. The large screen on the wall showed international board members joining virtually, their faces serious. "Good morning," James began, remaining standing at the head of the table. "I assume you've all heard about my flight yesterday. What you might not know is that it wasn't a random decision. Maya, please share the customer satisfaction data." Maya projected a graph onto the screen. "Over the past 5 years, our economy class satisfaction scores have dropped 47%. Premium cabin scores remain high, but overall customer loyalty has decreased by 35%. Most telling is this statistic: 68% of our former regular customers cite service disparity as their reason for switching airlines." Director Matthews cleared his throat. "Mr. Chen, if I may—" "One moment, Richard," James interrupted firmly. "I'm not finished." He pulled out his phone and played an audio recording from the flight. Sarah and Kevin's conversation about prioritizing premium passengers, mentioning Matthew's direct instructions. The director's face paled as his words echoed through the boardroom. "Premium cabin metrics are everything. Economy class is just overhead." "Would you care to explain this philosophy, Richard?" James asked, his voice calm but steely. "Because it seems to directly contradict everything this airline was built upon." Matthews straightened his shoulders defensively. "Sir, the premium market is where the profit lies. Our focus on high-value customers has driven revenue growth." "At what cost?" James challenged. "Show them the brand trust metrics, Maya." A new graph appeared, showing a steep decline in public trust and brand reputation. "We're losing something more valuable than premium ticket sales," James continued. "We're losing our identity, our reputation, and the loyalty of millions of passengers who believed in what AeroPacific stood for." He moved around the table, making eye contact with each board member. "Yesterday, I saw our current culture in action. I watched as medical assistance was denied to an economy passenger. I saw elderly travelers struggling without help, while premium cabin passengers received excessive attention. I witnessed firsthand how far we've fallen from our founding principles." Opening his briefcase, James pulled out a document. "This is my proposal for immediate structural changes. First, we're eliminating separate service metrics for different cabins. Every passenger will be evaluated on the same scale of care." He continued, "Second, we're overhauling our training program. Jennifer Wu, a flight attendant who embodies our original values, will lead this initiative. Third, we're redistributing our service resources equally across all cabins. And finally," He turned to Matthews. "We're restructuring our management team to align with these values." The room erupted in discussion. Some board members voiced concerns about revenue impact, while others showed immediate support. Through the screen, international directors engaged in heated debate. "I understand your concerns," James raised his hand for quiet. "But let me share something else from yesterday's flight." He played another recording, the conversation with the elderly couple who remembered his father, their words about the airline's original spirit. "This isn't just about service metrics or revenue streams," James explained. "It's about who we are as a company. Yesterday showed me that our best employees still believe in our original mission. They're just waiting for permission to show it." Maya displayed new data. Initial social media response to yesterday's events shows a 300% increase in positive brand mentions. Our customer service line reports hundreds of former customers expressing interest in returning if these changes are implemented. James laid out the final document, his detailed transformation plan. The choice is simple. We either return to our founding principles and rebuild our reputation, or we continue down this path of division and watch our brand lose everything that made it special. The room fell silent as board members studied the proposal. Through the screens, international directors leaned forward, engaged and thoughtful. Even Matthews seemed to be processing the gravity of the moment. The board meeting had stretched into its third hour, but the atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically. What began as tension and defensiveness had evolved into passionate discussion about AeroPacific's future. James stood at the window watching planes take off and land at SFO, each one carrying hundreds of passengers who would soon experience the airline's transformation. "The vote is unanimous," announced Patricia Wong, the board's chairwoman, setting down her pen. "The comprehensive service reformation plan is approved, effective immediately." She turned to Director Matthews, who had grown increasingly quiet as the meeting progressed. "Richard, your resignation will be processed by end of day." Matthews nodded stiffly, gathering his papers. As he stood to leave, James approached him. "Richard, wait. I'd like you to see something before you go." James gestured to Maya, who dimmed the lights and played a video on the main screen. It was footage from AeroPacific's first year of operation. Scenes of crew members helping passengers, regardless of cabin class, images of genuine care and attention that had once defined the airline. "This wasn't just marketing," James said quietly. "This was our identity. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of it. The metrics and cabin divisions you implemented might have boosted short-term profits, but they cost us something far more valuable, our soul." Matthews watched the footage, his expression softening slightly. "We were facing intense competition," he said, almost to himself. "Premium revenue seemed like the only way to stay competitive. I never intended." "I know," James replied, "but intention doesn't change impact. Those passengers yesterday, they showed me exactly what your policies did to our airline." After Matthews left, James turned back to the board. "Phase 1 begins now. Maya, please bring in our first team." The boardroom doors opened, and Sarah, Kevin, and Jennifer entered, accompanied by a group of senior flight attendants and ground crew representatives. Their expressions showed a mix of nervousness and determination. "Ladies and gentlemen," James addressed them, "you're here because you represent both sides of our current reality. Some of you, like Jennifer, never lost sight of our core values. Others, like Sarah and Kevin, have experienced firsthand how the wrong incentives can change behavior. Together, you'll form our service restoration team." Maya distributed tablets containing the newly approved plans. "Your first task," James continued, "is to redesign our service training program. Jennifer, you'll lead this initiative. Sarah and Kevin, Your recent experience makes you uniquely qualified to identify where and why our service standards declined. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. Sir, we've already started gathering input from crew members across different routes. The response has been overwhelming. People want to return to the airline's original vision. They just didn't think they were allowed to. Exactly, James nodded, which brings us to our next step. Maya pulled up a new presentation. Operation Equal Care launches next week. We're removing all cabin-based service metrics. Performance. Evaluations will focus on consistent care across all sections. We're also redistributing crew assignments to ensure experienced staff serve throughout the aircraft, not just in premium cabins. Kevin raised his hand. What about the passengers who paid for premium service? Won't they feel shortchanged? James smiled. Premium service shouldn't mean exclusive humanity. First and business class passengers will still enjoy their extra legroom, better meals and comfortable seats. But basic human dignity, respect and care, those aren't premium perks, they're fundamental rights. Jennifer opened her tablet showing a draft of the new training materials. We're incorporating real examples from yesterday's flight, both the problems and the solutions. Every new crew member will understand why these changes matter. Good, James approved. But training is just the beginning. Maya, show them the next phase. Maya displayed architectural renderings on the screen. We're redesigning our aircraft interiors. The rigid barrier between cabins will be replaced with more subtle dividers. Crew stations will be repositioned to serve all sections efficiently. And most importantly, medical supply access will be standardized throughout the aircraft. The room buzzed with energy as team members began discussing implementation details. James watched as Sarah and Kevin engaged enthusiastically with their colleagues. Their earlier shame transformed into determination to be part of the solution. One more thing, James announced, regaining their attention. Starting next month, every executive, including myself, will fly economy class at least once per quarter on different routes. We need to experience our airline the way most of our passengers do. The team broke into spontaneous applause. This wasn't just another corporate initiative. It was a return to their roots, a restoration of what had made AeroPacific special in the first place. As the meeting concluded, Jennifer approached James. Yesterday's flight changed everything, didn't it? James looked out at the runway again, where an AeroPacific plane was preparing for takeoff. Yesterday showed us what we'd lost, but also what we could be again. Every passenger on that flight, from the diabetic student to the elderly couple, reminded us that air travel isn't just about moving people from place to place. It's about treating everyone with dignity along the way. 1 month after the transformative flight, James Chen sat in his office reviewing the initial results of AeroPacific's service overhaul. The early morning sun cast long shadows across his desk, which was covered with passenger feedback forms, crew reports, and performance analytics. Maya entered with the latest data, her expression brightening as she handed over the report. Sir, you'll want to see these numbers. The first month's results are exceeding all projections. James opened the folder, scanning the statistics. Customer satisfaction scores had risen by 28% across all cabins. More significantly, the gap between premium and economy satisfaction ratings had narrowed dramatically. But it was the individual passenger stories that caught his attention. Look at this, he pointed to a particular feedback form. Remember the diabetic passenger from my flight? He's flown with us 3 more times since then. His latest comment, the transformation is real. Every flight feels like the airline cares again. Maya smiled, pulling up more feedback on her tablet. We're seeing similar responses across the network. The most common phrase in recent reviews is return to service. Even premium passengers are responding positively to the changes. James stood up, walking to the window where he could see several AeroPacific planes on the tarmac. Each one now bore a small addition beneath the company logo. Every journey matters. "How's the new training program going?" he asked, though he already knew the answer from Jennifer's daily updates. "Remarkable results," Maya replied, switching to another report. "Jennifer's team has completely revamped the orientation process. New crew members start by watching your father's story, then spend time serving in both premium and economy cabins. Sarah and Kevin's testimonials about their transformation have become a powerful training tool." The mention of Sarah and Kevin made James smile. The two flight attendants had become unexpected ambassadors for the airline's renewed culture. Their honest acknowledgement of past mistakes and commitment to change had resonated deeply with other crew members struggling with similar issues. "And the executive flying program?" he inquired. "Full compliance," Maya confirmed. "Every executive has completed their first economy flight. The insights have been invaluable. The VP of Operations was particularly moved after helping an elderly passenger with mobility issues, something he admitted he wouldn't have seen from a premium seat." James's phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. "You need to see this. Meeting the new crew at Gate C4. "Come with me," he told Maya, grabbing his jacket. "Something's happening at the terminal." They made their way through the corporate building and across to the terminal, where Jennifer was waiting with a group of newly trained crew members. The gate area was busy with passengers preparing for a flight to Chicago. "Watch," Jennifer said softly, gesturing to one of the new flight attendants. The young crew member was helping a mother with 3 young children organize their boarding passes and bags. But it wasn't just the help that caught James's attention, it was how she was doing it. She knelt down to the children's level, making them laugh as she helped sort their small backpacks. The mother's relief was evident as the attendant arranged for pre-boarding, ensuring the family could get settled without rushing. "That's Lisa," Jennifer explained. "She's from our first class of new trainees under the revised program. But look over there." At the counter, another new crew member was calmly helping a frustrated business traveler with a seating issue. The passenger's premium status was visible on the screen, but the service level remained consistent, respectful and helpful, without the excessive deference that had once been standard. "They're not just following procedures," Jennifer said proudly. "They're embracing the philosophy. Every passenger matters." James noticed something else. The rigid barrier between premium and economy check-in had been replaced with a more fluid system. Crew members moved between areas as needed, ensuring no passenger waited too long for assistance. Sarah appeared from the jet bridge, now serving as a senior crew trainer. "Mr. Chen," she called out, "would you like to see how we've redesigned the pre-flight briefing?" The group followed her onto the plane, where Kevin was conducting the crew briefing. Gone was the heavy emphasis on premium cabin priorities. Instead, he was discussing how to ensure consistent service throughout the aircraft. "Medical supply checks," Kevin asked the crew. "Completed in all cabins," a flight attendant responded. "Emergency response kits verified and accessible. Passenger assistance needs? 2 elderly passengers in 14C and 14D. 1 passenger with diabetes in 28A. Family with young children in row 12, another crew member reported. Support requirements noted for all sections." James listened as the briefing continued, noting how every passenger's needs were given equal attention regardless of their seat assignment. The transformation wasn't just procedural, it was cultural. A notification on Maya's tablet drew their attention. AeroPacific's latest customer loyalty scores had just been released. The numbers showed a significant return of passengers who had previously abandoned the airline, accompanied by strong positive sentiment across all cabin classes. 3 months after his undercover flight, James Chen found himself back at Gate A7 at San Francisco International Airport. This time, he wasn't wearing casual clothes or carrying a worn backpack. Instead, he stood in his usual business attire, observing the morning rush with newfound perspective. The gate area had been redesigned following the company's new philosophy. Gone were the stark divisions between premium and economy waiting areas. Instead, comfortable seating was distributed throughout, with priority boarding lanes subtly marked without creating obvious barriers. A digital display showed the airline's new slogan, "Every journey matters," along with real-time updates about flight status and boarding information. James watched as Sarah, now the lead trainer for the Western region, conducted a hands-on training session with a group of new flight attendants. She was demonstrating proper assistance techniques using a wheelchair, emphasizing the importance of dignity in every interaction. "Remember," she told her trainees, "whether a passenger needs help in row 4 or row 44, our response should be the same, immediate and compassionate." The trainees nodded, taking notes on their tablets. One raised her hand. "But what about during peak service times when we're stretched thin?" "Excellent question," Sarah replied, glancing at James with a knowing smile. "That's why we've restructured our service patterns. Kevin, could you demonstrate?" Kevin, who had been promoted to service flow coordinator, stepped forward with a digital diagram of the aircraft cabin. "We've redesigned our service patterns to ensure efficient coverage throughout all cabins. Instead of dividing crews by cabin class, we now work in synchronized teams. This ensures no section is ever understaffed." James moved closer to listen as Kevin explained the new system. The changes went beyond just service patterns. They reflected a fundamental shift in how the airline viewed its passengers and operations. A commotion near the check-in counter caught his attention. The same diabetic passenger from his undercover flight was checking in, but this time the experience was drastically different. The gate agent immediately noted his medical status and coordinated with the crew to ensure juice would be available near his seat. There was no need for call buttons or confrontations. The system was working as it should. "Mr. Chen," a familiar voice called out. He turned to see Jennifer, who had recently been promoted to Director of Service Culture. "I thought you might want to see this." She led him to a quiet corner where a large screen displayed various metrics. But these weren't the usual profit margins and premium cabin statistics. Instead, they showed passenger care indicators, response times to assistance requests, customer feedback scores, and most notably, a new metric: service consistency, rating across all cabins. "We're actually saving money," Jennifer explained, pulling up additional data. "When we stopped over-allocating resources to premium cabins and distributed them evenly, our overall efficiency improved. Plus, customer loyalty is up across all ticket classes." The morning's flight began boarding, and James watched the process with pride. The elderly couple he'd helped months ago were among the passengers, and they waved to him warmly. The wife approached, pulling something from her bag. "Look what I found," she said, handing him a faded photograph. It showed a much younger James, with his father at SFO, standing in front of an early AeroPacific aircraft. "Your father showed me this the day before he retired from the airport. He was so proud of what you were building." James studied the photograph, emotion welling up in his throat. "We almost lost our way," he said quietly. "But you found it again," she replied, patting his arm. "He would be proud of that too." The boarding process continued smoothly, with crew members attending to passengers' needs regardless of their seat assignments. James noticed Lisa, the new flight attendant he'd observed earlier, helping a premium passenger with the same genuine care she'd shown the family in economy. Maya appeared at his side with a tablet. "Sir, the latest numbers are in. Our customer satisfaction scores are now the highest in the industry, across all cabin classes." But James was more interested in the scene unfolding at the gate. A young mother struggling with a stroller was immediately assisted by 2 crew members. A business traveler in an expensive suit helped an elderly man with his laptop bag. Premium passengers chatted casually with those in economy, the artificial barriers of class distinction fading in the face of simple human kindness. "It's not just about the numbers anymore, is it?" Jennifer observed, joining them. "It never was," James replied. "We just forgot that for a while." The final boarding call echoed through the terminal. James watched as the last passengers made their way onto the plane, each receiving the same level of attention and respect. The gate agent's voice carried a genuine warmth as she wished them a pleasant flight. "Your father used to say something," the elderly woman mentioned before boarding. "He'd tell the cleaning crew, every seat carries a story. Looks like AeroPacific remembers that again." 6 months after the undercover flight that transformed AeroPacific Airlines, James Chen stood on stage at the annual Aviation Industry Conference in Singapore. The audience was packed with airline executives, industry leaders, and media representatives, all eager to hear about the remarkable turnaround that had become known as the Aero-Pacific Revolution. "When I boarded that flight 6 months ago," James began, his voice carrying across the hushed auditorium, "I thought I was investigating a service problem. Instead, I discovered something far more fundamental. We had lost sight of our humanity in pursuit of profit margins." The screen behind him displayed photographs from the airline's transformation journey, images of the new unified gate areas, crew members providing consistent service throughout aircraft, and happy passengers told a story of radical change. "Many of you asked how we managed to improve our service ratings so dramatically while maintaining profitability," James continued. "The answer is simple. We stopped seeing passengers as fare classes and started seeing them as people again." In the front row, Jennifer, Sarah, and Kevin sat proudly in their new management uniforms. They had been invited to share their perspectives on the airline's transformation, but more importantly, they represented the possibility of genuine change within the industry. "Let me tell you about 3 flights that perfectly illustrate our transformation," James said, clicking to the next slide. "Last week, a premium passenger on our Sydney route experienced a medical emergency. Instead of simply relocating him to economy where there was more space to help him, our crew transformed the premium cabin to accommodate emergency care. They understood that maintaining a passenger's dignity was as important as providing medical attention." He clicked to the next image. "On our Singapore-San Francisco route, a severe storm forced us to divert and delayed passengers for hours. Our crew didn't just serve premium passengers in the airport lounge. They created comfortable rest areas throughout the terminal, ensuring every passenger was cared for equally." The third image appeared, showing a familiar face. "And just yesterday, the diabetic passenger from my original undercover flight wrote to tell us he's become one of our most frequent flyers. Not because we offer the cheapest fares or the most luxurious seats, but because he knows he'll be treated with respect, regardless of his ticket class." In the audience, airline executives leaned forward, taking notes. The industry had been watching AeroPacific's transformation closely, especially after their customer satisfaction scores soared, and surprisingly, their revenue increased across all cabin classes. "But perhaps the most significant change," James continued, "isn't visible in our metrics or balance sheets. It's in the stories our employees now tell." He gestured to Sarah, who stood and took the microphone. "6 months ago, I was part of the problem," Sarah admitted to the audience. "I believed premium service meant treating some passengers better than others. Today, I train our crews to understand that true premium service means elevating everyone's experience while maintaining universal human dignity." Kevin took the stage next. "We've discovered that when you remove artificial barriers between cabin classes, something remarkable happens. Premium passengers don't feel their experience is diminished. Instead, they often become part of our service culture, helping fellow travelers and creating a more positive environment throughout the aircraft." Jennifer's presentation focused on the technical aspects of their transformation. By redistributing our resources more efficiently and eliminating redundant premium services, we've actually reduced our operating costs while improving service across all cabins. As his team shared their experiences, James reflected on how far they'd come. The airline's transformation had sparked a broader conversation within the industry about service equality and human dignity in air travel. Several major carriers had already begun implementing similar changes, recognizing that AeroPacific's revolution wasn't just good ethics, it was good business. Maya, who had been monitoring social media reactions to the conference, showed James her tablet. The hashtag #EveryJourneyMatters was trending globally, with passengers sharing their own experiences of the airline's transformation. After the presentations during the Q&A session, a reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Chen, your airline's transformation has been remarkable. But what happens when you eventually step down? How can you ensure these changes last?" James smiled, pulling out the worn photograph of himself and his father at SFO. "This isn't about me or any individual leader. We've rebuilt our entire culture around a simple truth my father taught me. Years ago, everyone who steps onto an aircraft is beginning a journey, and every journey matters." He gestured to his team on stage. "These leaders, and hundreds more throughout our organization, don't maintain our service standards because of policies or metrics. They do it because they've rediscovered why they chose this industry in the first place, to make air travel a dignified experience for everyone." 1 year to the day after his undercover flight, James Chen found himself once again in seat 28F on Flight 2547 from San Francisco to Seattle. This time, he wasn't wearing a disguise or carrying a worn backpack. He had deliberately chosen the same flight, same seat, to see how far they'd truly come. The terminal buzzed with morning energy, but it felt different now. The rigid lines between premium and economy passengers had dissolved, replaced by a more natural flow. At the gate, a digital display showed the AeroPacific promise. "Every journey matters," alongside real-time updates about the flight. Lisa, the flight attendant who had once been part of the first class of new trainees, was now the lead cabin crew member. She moved through the gate area with the same genuine care she'd shown during her training, helping passengers regardless of their ticket class. When she spotted James, her smile was warm and professional. "Good morning, Mr. Chen," she said. "Flying economy today?" "Every seat has a story," he replied, using his father's old saying that had become something of a company motto. The boarding process was smooth and organized. James watched as crew members assisted passengers with the same level of attention he'd hoped for a year ago. A young mother with twins was helped to her seat with care and patience. An elderly businessman in premium class received the same genuine service as a student in economy. As James settled into his familiar seat, he noticed small but significant changes throughout the cabin. The rigid curtain dividing classes had been replaced with a more subtle barrier. Crew stations were positioned to serve all sections efficiently. Most importantly, the atmosphere was different, more relaxed, more human. Sarah, who now served as Regional Service Director, was conducting a training observation on this flight. She moved through the cabin with Jennifer, who had recently been promoted to Vice President of Customer Experience. They were showing a group of airline executives from other carriers how AeroPacific's transformation worked in practice. "Notice how our service flow patterns ensure equal attention to all passengers," Sarah explained to the visiting executives. "We've found that this actually improves efficiency while maintaining premium service standards." James pulled out his tablet, reviewing the latest company data. The numbers told a compelling story. Customer satisfaction scores had stabilized at record highs across all cabin classes. More surprisingly, Premium cabin revenue had increased despite the elimination of excessive perks. Passengers were choosing AeroPacific not for artificial status markers, but for consistently excellent service. The flight reached cruising altitude, and James observed the crew in action. The same diabetic passenger from a year ago was on board again, but this time everything was different. The crew had prepared in advance, ensuring he had easy access to juice. They checked on him periodically without being asked, their care both professional and genuine. Kevin, now Director of Service Operations, walked through the cabin, pausing to chat with James. "Hard to believe it's been a year," he said quietly. "Sometimes I think about that first flight, how wrong we had it." "We all learned from it," James replied. "How's the new training center coming along?" Kevin's eyes lit up. "Amazing. We're hosting crews from airlines around the world. They all want to understand how we made this work. The simulator we built to teach empathy-based service is becoming an industry standard." A light turbulence announcement came over the intercom, and James watched as the crew smoothly transitioned into safety protocols. There was no difference in their attention to passengers in any section. When an anxious flyer in economy expressed concern about the turbulence, a crew member sat with her briefly, offering the same reassurance once reserved for premium passengers. Near the end of the flight, Maya sent James a message. The latest industry rankings had just been released. AeroPacific had been named world's most trusted airline for the first time in its history. The accompanying article specifically cited their revolutionary approach to passenger equality and consistent service excellence. As the plane began its descent into Seattle, James noticed a young man in a hoodie boarding pass marked for premium class being treated with the same respect he hadn't received a year ago. The transformation had come full circle. After landing, James waited until most passengers had deplaned. Standing in the empty cabin, he thought about his father's years at SFO, watching passengers stream past his cleaning cart. "Everyone who steps on a plane is starting a journey," he used to say. "They all deserve to feel valued." Jennifer approached him as he prepared to leave. "You know what the best part is?" she said, gesturing to the cabin. "This isn't special anymore. This is just who we are now." James nodded, touching the seat that had started it all. That was always the goal, not to create a program or initiative, but to restore our soul. As he walked through the Seattle terminal, James passed a wall of photographs recently installed in the AeroPacific gate area. They showed moments from the airline's history, including one of his father in his cleaning uniform, standing proudly beside a young James. Below it, a plaque read, "Every seat carries a story. Every journey matters. Every passenger deserves dignity." The revolution that had begun with one undercover flight had become a movement, transforming not just AeroPacific, but challenging the entire industry to remember its humanity. As James headed toward the exit, he overheard a passenger telling her friend, "You should fly AeroPacific. They treat everyone like they matter." And in the end, that was all his father had ever wanted. The transformation of AeroPacific Airlines had begun in the air, but its true power emerged in unexpected places throughout the organization. 14 months after James Chen's undercover flight, the changes had created a ripple effect that touched every corner of the company, from baggage handlers to booking agents, maintenance crews to marketing teams. In the pre-dawn hours at San Francisco International Airport, Ramon Garcia, a veteran baggage handler of 15 years, was teaching new employees about the company's renewed approach to luggage handling. "See these bags?" He gestured to a cart of suitcases. "Each one represents someone's journey. That's not just a slogan anymore." Ramon had witnessed the transformation firsthand. Before, baggage handlers were pressured to prioritize premium-tagged luggage, creating inefficiencies and delays. Now, They had implemented a new system that ensured all bags were handled with equal care and efficiency. "Watch this," Ramon demonstrated to his trainees, carefully arranging bags for optimal unloading. "When we treat every bag as important, we actually work faster. No more shuffling things around, looking for priority tags." Above them in the terminal, Angela Chen, no relation to James, worked at the reservation desk, where another kind of change was unfolding. A passenger was trying to book a last-minute flight for a family emergency, but could only afford economy class. "Before the transformation, I would have just quoted the price and moved on," Angela explained to her trainee. "Now, we're empowered to listen to passengers' stories and find solutions." She worked with the passenger to apply a bereavement fare discount and ensured the family was seated together. In the maintenance hangar, Chief Engineer Tom Sullivan was conducting his morning briefing with his team. The massive space echoed with the sound of tools and equipment, but the message was clear. The comfort and safety of every seat matters equally. We don't just check the premium seats more thoroughly anymore. Every passenger deserves our best work. The maintenance team had reorganized their inspection protocols, eliminating the old system that had somehow prioritized premium cabin maintenance. The result was more efficient operations and improved overall aircraft reliability. At headquarters, the marketing department was undergoing its own revolution. Creative Director Sophia Patel stood before her team, reviewing their latest campaign materials. Gone were the advertisements that subtly reinforced class divisions. Instead, their new messaging focused on the shared human experience of air travel. "Look at these numbers," Sophia pointed to their latest market research. "When we stopped selling status and started promoting dignity, our brand resonance increased across all demographic groups." The call center, once segregated into premium and economy service teams, had been completely restructured. Linda Morrison, a 10-year veteran agent, now handled calls from all passengers with the same level of attention. "Yesterday, I helped a CEO book a business trip, then assisted a student flying home for the holidays," Linda shared during a team meeting. "The amazing thing is, the CEO commented on how much more human our service feels now." The ripple effect reached even the company's IT department. Software engineers were redesigning the booking system to remove hidden biases that had subtly favored premium passengers. Project lead Marcus Wong explained to his team, "We're creating algorithms that optimize for overall passenger satisfaction, not just premium metrics." In the catering division, executive chef Maria Rodriguez was revolutionizing the airline's food service approach. While maintaining premium cabin meal quality, she had significantly improved economy class offerings without increasing costs. "It's about dignity in dining," Maria explained to her kitchen staff. "We discovered that by focusing on quality ingredients and thoughtful presentation across all cabins, we actually reduced waste and improved satisfaction scores throughout the aircraft." The transformation had even influenced the airline's hiring practices. HR Director David Thompson reviewed applications differently now. "We're not just looking for service skills," he explained during a recruitment meeting. "We're looking for people who naturally understand that every human interaction matters." James Chen witnessed these changes during his regular walks through different departments. In the crew room at SFO, he overheard a conversation between veteran and new flight attendants that captured the essence of the transformation. "I used to dread economy cabin assignments," a senior crew member admitted to a group of trainees. "Now, I actually prefer the mixed cabin rotation. You get to help more people, make more meaningful connections." Maya joined James on his rounds, tablet in hand as always. "Sir, look at these internal satisfaction scores." She showed him the latest employee survey results. "Job satisfaction is up 64% across all departments. Turnover has dropped to historic lows." But it was a simple interaction in the terminal that really demonstrated the depth of change. A ground crew member noticed a passenger struggling with a heavy carry-on at the check-in area. Without being asked, he paused his tasks to help, not knowing or caring what class the passenger was flying. "That's what success looks like," James told Maya, watching the interaction. "When treating people with dignity becomes instinctive, not instructed." The transformation had created a self-reinforcing cycle. Employees who embraced the new culture inspired their colleagues, who in turn influenced others. The ripple effect had turned into a wave of positive change that continued to grow stronger with each passing day. The AeroPacific Customer Service Center in downtown San Francisco had transformed from a complaint processing facility into what employees now called the Stories Hub. On this particular morning, 15 months after James Chen's undercover flight, the center was hosting a unique event, a gathering of passengers who had returned to the airline after previously vowing never to fly with them again. Rachel Martinez, head of customer relations, stood before a room filled with diverse faces: business travelers, families, students, and retirees. Each had their own story of leaving AeroPacific, and more importantly, their reason for coming back. "When we started tracking returning customers," Rachel explained to James, who had come to hear these stories firsthand, "we noticed something remarkable. They weren't just coming back for lower fares or convenient schedules. They were coming back because they'd heard about our transformation." Mark Thompson, a technology executive who used to be a vocal critic of the airline on social media, stood up to share his experience. "I had sworn off AeroPacific after years of feeling like a second-class citizen in economy. But 3 months ago, I gave them another chance after reading about the changes. The difference was astounding." He pulled up his phone, showing his travel history. "I've flown 12 segments since then, both economy and business class. The remarkable thing isn't just that the service is better, it's that it's consistently excellent, regardless of which cabin I'm in." A young woman named Sophie Chen, no relation to James, shared her story next. As a graduate student frequently flying between research facilities, she had experienced the airline both before and after the transformation. "I have a severe anxiety disorder," Sophie explained. "Before, flying was a nightmare, unless I could afford premium seats, which I rarely could. Now, the crew's attention to passenger well-being isn't tied to ticket class. They make sure I'm comfortable regardless of where I'm sitting." James listened as more passengers shared their experiences. A family of 4 described how they'd returned to AeroPacific for their annual vacation after 3 years with other carriers. A retired couple spoke about how they'd resumed their cross-country trips to visit grandchildren. Each story reinforced the impact of the airline's renewed commitment to dignity. Maya, who had been analyzing the data, displayed some striking statistics. 78% of passengers who left AeroPacific in the 2 years before the transformation have booked at least one flight with us in the past year. More significantly, 92% of those have booked additional flights. But it wasn't just individual passengers who were returning. Corporate accounts that had previously discontinued their relationships with AeroPacific were coming back as well. James watched as Patricia Wong, now head of corporate partnerships, shared an unexpected trend. "Companies are actually requesting that their employees fly with us, even if our fares aren't the lowest," Patricia explained. "They've found that their people arrive more relaxed and productive because they're treated well, regardless of ticket class." One returning corporate client, a major tech company, had made AeroPacific their preferred carrier specifically because of the transformation. Their travel manager explained, "When we send employees of different levels on the same flight, they all receive the same dignified treatment. It aligns with our own corporate values about workplace equality." The event revealed another unexpected outcome. Passengers were becoming brand ambassadors. Linda Morgan, a teacher who had reconnected with AeroPacific after 5 years away, described how she actively encouraged others to return. "I run a large online travel community," Linda shared. "For years, I warned people away from AeroPacific. Now, I find myself sharing stories about their transformation. Last week, a member posted about a flight where her elderly mother received the same attentive care in economy that used to be reserved for premium passengers." James noticed a familiar face in the crowd, the diabetic passenger from his undercover flight. The young man had become something of a legend within the company, his story often used in training sessions. Today, he was there to share an update. "I've flown 36 segments with AeroPacific since that day," he said. "Not because I had to, but because I choose to. The crew doesn't just remember my medical needs, they remember me as a person. That's the difference." The most powerful testament came from an unexpected source. A former premium-only passenger who had initially complained about the changes stood to speak. "I was angry when they stopped the excessive premium cabin perks," he admitted. "I thought they were diminishing the first-class experience. But I've realized something. True luxury isn't about creating artificial divisions. It's about being part of an airline that treats everyone with respect." As the event concluded, Rachel shared one final statistic that captured the magnitude of the transformation. "Our Net Promoter Score, which measures how likely passengers are to recommend us to others, has tripled. But here's the remarkable part. The scores are nearly identical across all cabin classes." James stayed afterward, speaking with passengers one-on-one, hearing their personal stories of rediscovery and renewal. A common theme emerged. They weren't just returning to an airline, they were returning to a belief that air travel could be both efficient and humane. Maya approached with her tablet, showing him the latest booking data. "Sir, we're seeing something unprecedented. Passengers are actually choosing our economy seats over other airlines' premium offerings, citing our service culture as the deciding factor." James nodded, watching as the returning passengers continued to share stories with each other. "That's because they're not just booking seats anymore," he said. "They're choosing to be part of something bigger, an airline that remembers every passenger is human first, fare class second." The annual Global Aviation Summit in Dubai had always been a showcase of luxury and premium service innovations. But this year, 18 months after James Chen's transformative flight, the conversation had shifted dramatically. The largest conference room was packed for a session titled "The Aero-Pacific Effect, Redefining Airline Service Standards." James sat in the front row, watching as airline executives from around the world discussed the impact of his company's transformation. On stage, CEOs from 3 major carriers were engaged in a panel discussion about the changing landscape of air travel. "We initially dismissed it as a marketing gimmick," admitted Richard Wagner, CEO of European Airways. "But when we saw AeroPacific's passenger satisfaction scores and revenue growth, we realized this was something more fundamental. They weren't just changing their service, they were changing the industry's basic assumptions." The market analysts presented data showing a clear trend. Airlines that maintained rigid class divisions were losing market share to those adopting more egalitarian service models. Even ultra-luxury carriers were being forced to reconsider their approach. Sarah, now AeroPacific's Global Service Director, presented case studies from their transformation. As she shared specific examples of their new service model, James noticed airline executives furiously taking notes. The questions that followed revealed how deeply his company's changes had rattled the industry. "But how do you maintain premium cabin revenue without creating obvious service disparities?" asked the CEO of Asian Star Airlines. "We've discovered that premium passengers aren't paying for better humanity. They're paying for better physical comfort," Sarah explained. "When you provide consistent human dignity across all cabins, premium passengers actually report higher satisfaction because they don't feel guilty about their privilege." During the coffee break, James overheard conversations that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Airline executives were discussing ways to retrain their crews, redesign their cabins, and restructure their service models. Competition was no longer about who could offer the most excessive premium perks, but who could deliver the most consistent dignity across all classes. Maya approached with her tablet, showing him the latest industry reports. "Sir, look at this. 3 major airlines have already announced service overhauls following our model. 2 more are in discussions with Jennifer about consulting on their transformation." The afternoon sessions revealed the depth of change rippling through the industry. A panel of aircraft manufacturers discussed new cabin designs that maintained comfort differences while reducing psychological barriers between classes. Catering companies presented meal services that preserved premium quality while ensuring economy passengers felt valued. But the most striking presentation came from a market research firm that had studied the broader impact of AeroPacific's transformation. Their lead analyst, Dr. Emily Chang, shared surprising findings. "What we're seeing isn't just a change in service standards," she explained. "It's a fundamental shift in how passengers view air travel. The data shows that travelers are now choosing airlines based on their treatment of all passengers, not just their personal cabin class." The presentation showed how this shift was affecting airline economics. Traditional metrics like premium, cabin revenue, and class upgrades were being replaced by new measurements of overall passenger satisfaction and service consistency. During the technology showcase, James watched as companies demonstrated new systems designed to support this industry-wide transformation. Booking platforms now highlighted airlines' service equality ratings. Crew management software included tools for ensuring consistent attention across all cabins. A startup founded by former flight attendants presented an app that helped crews track passenger needs regardless of seat assignment. "We were inspired by AeroPacific's model," the founder explained. "This helps airlines maintain service equity while preserving class distinctions where they matter in physical comfort, not human dignity." The summit's keynote speaker, a renowned aviation industry historian, put the transformation in perspective. "In 50 years of studying this industry, I've never seen a single company's philosophical change have such widespread impact. AeroPacific hasn't just improved their service, they've challenged the industry's basic assumptions about class, dignity, and human value." As the day drew to a close, James was approached by the CEO of one of the world's largest airlines. "We fought this trend at first," the CEO admitted. "We thought maintaining strict class divisions was crucial to our premium revenue, but our own passengers are demanding change. They've seen what's possible, and they won't accept less anymore." On the flight back to San Francisco, James read through the conference summary Maya had prepared. Airlines worldwide were reporting similar patterns. Passengers were choosing carriers based on their commitment to dignified service. Premium travelers were appreciating the more egalitarian atmosphere, and crew satisfaction was improving under the new service models. Jennifer, who had attended several private meetings with airline executives during the summit, shared her observations. "They're not just copying our procedures," she said. "They're wrestling with the same fundamental questions we faced. How do you maintain luxury while ensuring dignity? How do you train crews to see passengers as people first, fare classes second?" The in-flight magazine on his seat included an industry analysis titled "The End of Service Apartheid." The article detailed how AeroPacific's transformation had sparked a revolution in air travel. forcing airlines to reconsider practices that had gone unquestioned for decades. As their plane approached SFO, James reflected on how a single undercover flight had grown into an industry-wide movement. The changes he'd initiated weren't just improving one airline, they were reshaping how the world approached air travel, one flight at a time. Despite AeroPacific's successful transformation, not every aspect of change had come easily. 20 months after James Chen's undercover flight, the airline faced its most challenging test yet, managing internal resistance from those deeply invested in the old system. The executive conference room at AeroPacific headquarters buzzed with tension as James reviewed the latest internal assessment report. While most employees had embraced the new culture, pockets of resistance remained, particularly among long-time managers who had built their careers on the previous system. "We're seeing what I'd call selective compliance," Meyer explained, displaying data on the screen. "Some station managers are maintaining unofficial priority systems, disguising them as operational efficiency measures." The report highlighted specific instances: a Los Angeles gate manager who consistently pre-boarded premium passengers under the guise of crowd control, a Chicago crew scheduler who assigned senior flight attendants exclusively to premium routes, and a Sydney station director who maintained separate customer service lines despite the new unified service policy. James leaned back in his chair, studying the patterns. "They're not just resisting change," he observed, "they're protecting what they see as their territory." Jennifer, who had been working directly with resistant staff members, shared her insights. "Many of these managers built their careers on catering to premium passengers. They see our new approach as a threat to their expertise and status." The challenge became clear during a particularly tense meeting with regional managers. Marcus Reynolds, a 20-year veteran station manager from Boston, voiced what many were thinking. "We're diluting our premium product. My high-value customers are questioning why they should pay more if everyone gets the same service." James stood up, moving to the whiteboard. "Let me ask you something, Marcus. When your mother flies, what class does she usually book?" "Economy," Marcus admitted. "She's retired, watching her expenses." "And how do you want her to be treated?" The room fell silent as the point landed, but the resistance wasn't just at the management level. Some premium cabin crew members struggled with the changes, feeling their specialized skills were being devalued. Sarah, drawing from her own journey, led a series of honest conversations with these crew members. In a packed crew room at JFK, she addressed their concerns directly. "I understand your fears," she acknowledged. "I felt them too. But we're not losing our expertise, we're expanding its impact. Our premium service skills are now benefiting every passenger, and our job satisfaction has actually increased." The numbers supported her statement. Internal surveys showed that crew members who fully embraced the new approach reported higher job satisfaction and received better passenger feedback across all cabins. Yet another challenge emerged from an unexpected quarter: some premium passengers who had grown accustomed to exclusive treatment. James received a letter from a group of frequent first-class flyers threatening to switch airlines. His response became a case study in change management. He invited these passengers to a special dinner where they could share their concerns. Instead of defensive explanations, he asked them to help shape the future of premium travel. "We're not eliminating luxury," he explained over dinner. "We're redefining it. True luxury isn't about making others feel less valued. It's about enjoying comfort while knowing everyone on board is treated with dignity." The conversation shifted as passengers shared their own experiences. A CEO admitted feeling uncomfortable watching economy passengers being ignored during delays. A business executive described the awkwardness of receiving elaborate service while fellow travelers were treated curtly. To address the operational challenges, James initiated what he called shadow days, where resistant managers worked incognito in different roles throughout the airline. Marcus Reynolds' perspective changed dramatically after spending a day as an economy passenger on a full flight. "I get it now," he reported afterward. "We're not just changing procedures, we're changing lives. I watched a flight attendant help an elderly woman in economy with the same care I'd want for my mother." The transformation team developed new training modules specifically addressing resistance to change. They brought in psychologists to help staff understand the emotional aspects of adapting to new systems and created support groups where employees could openly discuss their struggles with the transition. Maya's data showed a gradual but steady shift. "Look at these trends," she pointed out. "As each resistant manager or crew member comes around, they bring others with them. It's creating a snowball effect." The most powerful tool in overcoming resistance proved to be success stories from converted skeptics. Former critics who had embraced the new approach became its most convincing advocates. Jennifer organized a series of journey journals where employees shared their transformation experiences. These honest accounts of struggle, adaptation, and ultimate acceptance became required reading in their training program. As James reviewed these journals late one evening, he came across an entry from a former resistant manager. "I used to think treating everyone with equal dignity would diminish our premium service. Now I understand, when you lift everyone up, you raise the entire airline." 2 years after James Chen's transformative flight, AeroPacific's revolution faced its greatest challenge yet, adapting its philosophy of universal dignity to diverse cultural contexts across the globe. The airline's international routes had become testing grounds for whether true service equality could transcend cultural boundaries. In the bustling terminal of Tokyo's Narita Airport, AeroPacific's Japanese team was pioneering their own interpretation of the company's values. Station manager Yuki Tanaka had initially worried that the Western-born concept might conflict with Japan's deeply ingrained service hierarchies. "We had to find a way to maintain our cultural respect for status while ensuring every passenger felt valued," Yuki explained to James during his visit. "The solution came from our tea ceremony tradition, where every guest, regardless of rank, receives the same precise care and attention." The Japanese team had developed a unique approach that James now watched in action. A group of school children in economy class received the same deep bows and careful attention as business executives. In premium cabins, the difference lay not in the level of respect, but in the customization of service to each passenger's needs. At Dubai International Airport, another cultural adaptation was taking shape. Regional Director Fatima Al-Rashid had faced the challenge of implementing equal service standards in a region where class distinctions were deeply embedded in social structures. "We found our answer in traditional Arabic hospitality," Fatima shared, during a regional leadership meeting. "Our culture teaches that every guest is a gift from God. We use this principle to show that treating all passengers with dignity actually aligns with our deepest values." The Dubai team had created a service model that maintained luxury for premium passengers, while ensuring economy travelers experienced the same legendary Middle Eastern hospitality. Prayer rooms were equally accessible to all passengers, and crew members were trained to assist with religious observances regardless of cabin class. In Mumbai, AeroPacific's Indian operations had transformed potential cultural obstacles into unique opportunities. Station Director Raj Patel led James through the terminal, showing how they'd adapted the company's philosophy to local contexts. "India has ancient traditions of respect and hospitality," Raj explained, "but also deep social hierarchies. We're showing that modern air travel can honor tradition while promoting equality." The Indian team had introduced innovative touches, traditional welcome gestures for all passengers, not just premium classes. assistance with family seating that respected cultural norms, and special attention to elderly passengers across all cabins, reflecting Indian values of elder respect. Maya's global data revealed fascinating patterns. Each region has found its own way to implement our principles, she reported, displaying metrics on her tablet. But the results are consistently positive across all cultural contexts. The transformation had spread to unexpected areas. In Singapore, AeroPacific's partnership with Changi Airport had led to a revolutionary redesign of gate areas. Instead of separate premium lounges, they created shared spaces with different comfort zones, available to all passengers based on need rather than ticket class. A nursing mother in economy deserves a quiet space as much as a business traveler, explained Singapore station manager Lisa Tan. We're proving that dignity and practical needs matter more than fare class. During a stopover in Seoul, James witnessed how the Korean team had integrated local corporate culture with the airline's new philosophy. Premium cabin passengers from major Korean companies were actually requesting to be seated in economy with their junior colleagues, breaking down traditional hierarchies. It's creating ripples beyond air travel, noted Korean Operations Director Min Jun Park. Companies are seeing how our model of respectful service equality can transform their own corporate cultures. The most striking success came from AeroPacific's Chinese roots. In a culture where face and status were paramount, the airline had achieved something remarkable, making economy class travel socially prestigious because of its association with progressive values. Our passengers are proud to tell others they flew AeroPacific Economy, reported Beijing station manager Li Wei. It's become a statement about valuing human dignity over status symbols. The global implementation had revealed an unexpected truth. The desire for human dignity transcended cultural boundaries. Each region had found its own way to express this universal need, creating a rich tapestry of approaches united by a common thread. In London, a British crew had adapted the concept to fit local sensibilities. We maintain the British attention to class comfort, explained UK Service Director Emma Phillips, but we've eliminated the subtle condescension that often came with it. Every passenger gets the same warm welcome, just with different seats. The transformation's global success had caught the attention of international aviation authorities. The International Air Transport Association, IATA, had begun studying AeroPacific's model as a potential new standard for global aviation service. James gathered his international leadership team for a global video conference, connecting stations from Sydney to São Paulo. Each region shared their unique implementation stories, creating a powerful mosaic of cultural adaptations united by a common purpose. We're not just changing an airline, James concluded. We're showing that respect for human dignity can be a universal language, spoken in different accents, but understood by all. 2.5 years after James Chen's undercover journey, AeroPacific's board gathered for a special strategic planning session focused on the next decade of airline service. The company's transformation had succeeded beyond expectations, but James knew that standing still meant falling behind. The presentation room at headquarters had been transformed into an innovation lab with prototypes and concept models displaying potential futures for air travel. Engineers, designers, and service experts mingled with board members, sharing visions of how technology and humanity could continue evolving together. The question isn't just about maintaining what we've achieved, James began, addressing the gathered leaders. It's about asking, what does dignity in air travel look like in 2035, in 2045? Jennifer, now Chief of Innovation, unveiled their first major initiative, Project Skybridge. The detailed plans showed a revolutionary aircraft design developed in partnership with leading manufacturers, where the traditional class barriers were replaced with flexible zones that could be customized based on passenger needs rather than ticket price. Imagine seating that adapts to human requirements rather than status, Jennifer explained, showing holographic models. The economy passenger with mobility needs could have more space than a premium passenger who prefers cozy quarters. It's about matching comfort to actual human needs. The technical team presented new artificial intelligence systems designed to support, not replace, human interaction. Our AI will help crew members anticipate passenger needs across all cabins, explained Dr. Marcus Wong, head of digital innovation. But it's programmed with our core value. Technology serves humanity, not the other way around. Sarah, leading the Future Service Development team, demonstrated their next-generation training programs using virtual reality. New crew members could now experience countless scenarios from multiple perspectives, understanding how different passengers experienced air travel. But the real innovation, Sarah emphasized, is in how we're redefining luxury itself. Future. Premium cabins won't be about separation from others. They'll be about choosing your preferred comfort level while remaining part of a dignified whole. Maya presented data projections showing how passenger expectations were evolving. The next generation of travelers values authenticity over exclusivity, she explained. They want comfort without complexity, luxury without hierarchy. The environmental team shared plans for sustainable aviation that emphasized shared responsibility across all cabin classes. Every passenger, regardless of ticket class, will be part of our environmental commitment, explained Environmental Director Elena Rodriguez. We're developing programs where passengers can collectively contribute to carbon offset initiatives. James watched as his teams outlined various aspects of the airline's future. The catering division presented concepts for personalized nutrition that wouldn't differentiate by class, but by individual health needs and preferences. The design team showed new cabin layouts that promoted community while respecting privacy. Look at this. Kevin demonstrated their new crew coordination system. It doesn't just track service tasks, it measures meaningful interactions, ensuring every passenger receives personal attention regardless of seat assignment. The airport. Experienced team unveiled plans for revolutionary terminal designs. We're working with airports worldwide to create spaces that flow naturally, where comfort is available based on need rather than status, explained Architecture Director Thomas Chen, no relation to James. But perhaps the most ambitious proposal came from the Education Department. We're establishing the AeroPacific Academy of Service Excellence, announced Training Director Lisa Wu. It's not just about training our staff. We want to help reshape how the entire industry thinks about passenger service. The Academy's curriculum would be available to other airlines, airports, and service industries, spreading AeroPacific's philosophy of universal dignity beyond aviation. We're creating a legacy that will outlast any single company, Lisa explained. James then introduced their most ambitious initiative, the Human Flight Project. This long-term research program would study how air travel affected human well-being, dignity and connection across all social and economic backgrounds. We're partnering with universities, psychologists, and social scientists, James explained. We want to understand not just how people fly, but how flying impacts human relationships, cultural understanding, and global community. The board members listened intently as each team shared their vision of aviation's future. This wasn't just about maintaining AeroPacific's transformation, it was about continuing to evolve and lead the industry's human-centered revolution. Our father used to say, "Every seat carries a story," James concluded. Our job for the next decade is to ensure every story enriches the human experience of flight, regardless of where in the aircraft it takes place. The session concluded with a virtual reality demonstration of a typical flight in 2035. Board members experienced how seamlessly technology and human touch could combine to create an environment where every passenger felt valued, regardless of ticket class. As the presentation ended, Maya shared one final insight. Our research shows that children who fly with us today are developing different expectations about air travel. They don't see class divisions as natural or necessary. They're growing up understanding that dignity isn't a premium product. It's a human right. James looked around the room at the prototypes, plans and possibilities. The transformation he'd sparked with one undercover flight had grown into something larger than he'd imagined. A complete reimagining of what air travel could be. "We're not just planning the future of an airline," he told the board. "We're helping shape the future of human connection in the skies." 3 years after James Chen's transformative flight, the true test of AeroPacific's revolution wasn't in its innovations or accolades, but in how deeply the changes had become embedded in the company's DNA. The proof emerged not in board meetings or official reports, but in the countless small moments that showed how completely the culture had transformed. On a quiet Tuesday morning at San Francisco International Airport, a new hire named Tommy Rodriguez was shadowing veteran flight attendant Maria Santos. As they prepared for the morning flight to Chicago, Tommy noticed something unusual about Maria's pre-flight routine. "Why do you write down passenger names?" he asked, watching her review the manifest. Maria smiled, continuing her notes. "Because Mr. Chen taught us that every seat carries a story. I like to know at least 3 names in each section of the plane. It helps me remember we're serving people, not seat numbers." This wasn't part of any official procedure. It was one of countless small traditions that had organically developed as the airline's values took root. Throughout the system, employees had created their own ways of embodying the spirit of universal dignity. In the maintenance hangar, Chief Engineer Frank Wilson had instituted what he called the every seat protocol. "Before signing off on any repair or upgrade, my team sits in every affected seat," he explained during a routine inspection. "Premium or economy doesn't matter. Each passenger deserves the same level of safety and comfort." The transformation had even influenced how the airline handled hiring. HR Director Patricia Lee shared their evolved approach during a department meeting. "We don't just ask candidates about their service skills anymore. We present them with scenarios that test their understanding of human dignity. Their technical qualifications matter, but their humanity matters more." Maya's latest cultural audit revealed how deeply these changes had penetrated. "Look at this," she showed James, displaying data on her tablet. "Employees are spontaneously creating their own initiatives to reinforce our values. They're not waiting for top-down directives anymore." She highlighted several examples. Ground crews in Seattle had started a dignity diary, where they shared daily examples of exceptional service across all cabin classes. Catering staff in Chicago had developed their own system for ensuring meal quality was consistent throughout the aircraft. Gate agents in Miami had created informal support groups to help each other maintain service standards during high-stress periods. The transformation was particularly evident in how the airline handled challenges. During a major weather delay in Denver, James witnessed the new culture in action. Instead of defaulting to old patterns of prioritizing premium passengers, the crew naturally organized support based on passenger needs. Families with young children, elderly travelers, and those with connections were assisted first, regardless of ticket class. "It's not even a conscious decision anymore," explained station manager Robert Martinez. "It's just how we think now. We see people first, fare class second." The airline's training center had become a living laboratory of cultural transmission. New employees weren't just taught procedures. They were immersed in stories and experiences that brought the airline's values to life. "We call it heritage training," Jennifer explained, leading James through a training session. "New hires spend their first day learning about your undercover flight, but they also hear stories from veterans about their own transformation journeys. It makes our values personal and real." Sarah had developed what she called cultural touchstones, and thus key moments in every employee's career where they reconnected with the airline's core mission. These weren't formal evaluations, but opportunities for reflection and renewal. Every year, on the anniversary of their hire date, employees spend one shift working in a different role, Sarah explained. Premium crew work economy, ground staff fly as passengers, executives serve as flight attendants. It keeps us grounded in our commitment to universal dignity. The changes were evident even in how employees talked about their work. The old terminology of premium service and economy service had naturally faded away, replaced by phrases like personalized care and universal attention. Kevin, supervising a crew briefing, demonstrated how completely the language had evolved. "Today, we have 256 stories in our care," he told his team, never once mentioning cabin classes. "Each one deserves our best chapter." The cultural embedding was perhaps most visible in how the airline handled promotions and recognition. The highest awards now went to employees who best demonstrated the ability to provide consistent, dignified service across all passenger groups. "Look at these nomination forms," Maya showed James. 3 years ago, it was all about premium cabin, metrics. Now employees are recognizing each other for moments of genuine human connection, regardless of where in the aircraft they occurred. James visited the crew lounge, where walls once decorated with advertisements for premium services now displayed photographs and stories celebrating acts of kindness and dignity from throughout the aircraft. Each story reinforced the airline's transformed culture. A senior flight attendant named Grace Chen, no relation, summed it up best during a crew debrief. "We used to compete over who got premium cabin assignments. Now we compete over who can make every passenger feel equally valued. The satisfaction is deeper because it's real." As James walked through the terminal, he overheard a conversation between 2 ground crew members that proved how deeply the changes had taken root. They were discussing how to handle a complex situation with overbooked flights. "Remember," one said to the other, "we're not just managing seats, we're caring for journeys. Every passenger's story matters equally." 3.5 years after his undercover flight, James Chen found himself walking through San Francisco International Airport long after most flights had departed. The terminal was quiet, with only the hum of cleaning equipment and the soft footsteps of maintenance staff breaking the silence. He'd come here often as a child, watching his father work the night shift as a janitor. Now, in the same quiet hours, he observed another janitor carefully cleaning the gate area seats, economy and premium alike, with equal attention. "Evening, Mr. Chen," the janitor said, recognizing him. "You're here late." "Just walking," James replied. "Remembering." The janitor, whose name tag read Michael, nodded understanding. "Your father used to work these halls, didn't he? The old-timers still tell stories about him." This caught James's attention. "What kind of stories?" Michael leaned on his cleaning cart, how he'd talk about dignity while mopping floors, how he dreamed of an airline where every passenger felt valued. The veterans say he saw something others missed, that underneath the fancy suits or casual clothes, passengers were all just people taking journeys. James sat in one of the recently cleaned seats, memories washing over him. He recalled walking these same terminals with his father 30 years ago, listening to his observations about air travel's unspoken hierarchies. "See that businessman?" his father would say, pointing to a harried traveler in first class. Under that expensive suit, he's worried about missing his daughter's recital. Then, gesturing to an elderly woman in economy, she's flying to meet her first grandchild. Tell me, Jimmy, which journey matters more? Maya found him there, tablet in hand as always, but tonight she wasn't sharing data or metrics. Instead, she handed him a collection of letters, memories and stories about his father gathered from long-time airport staff. One former gate agent wrote, Mr. Chen Sr. would help passengers regardless of their ticket class. Once, I saw him spend an hour helping a lost child in economy find her parents, then turn around and assist a premium passenger with his luggage. He showed me that dignity isn't about class, it's about humanity. Another letter from a retired flight attendant read, Your father used to tell us, when you serve coffee in first class or water in economy, you're not just serving drinks. You're part of someone's journey. I never forgot that. Now, seeing how AeroPacific has transformed, I realize he was ahead of his time. James walked to the window, where aircraft stood silent in the moonlight, their AeroPacific logos gleaming. He remembered standing in this same spot as a teenager, sharing his dreams with his father. I'm going to build an airline someday, he'd declared. The best airline in the world. His father had smiled, continuing to mop the floor. Make it the most human airline instead, he'd replied. The rest will follow. Sarah found him lost in thought. She'd come to prepare for an early morning flight, but recognized the significance of the moment. You know, she said, joining him at the window, when we do our heritage training, new employees always ask about your undercover flight. But the story that really moves them is about your father, how the son of an airport janitor built an airline based on his father's philosophy of universal dignity. James nodded, remembering the days after his father's passing, before AeroPacific existed. He'd been offered partnerships in existing airlines, but had declined them all, determined to build something new, something that would honor his father's vision. Jennifer arrived with an architectural model of AeroPacific's new terminal design. The plans showed no separate premium lounges or exclusive areas. Instead, comfort zones were distributed throughout, available to any passenger who needed them. Your father would have appreciated this, she said softly. Every space designed for human needs rather than ticket class. Kevin joined them, having just finished briefing the overnight crew. You know what I realized, he said. Your father saw the whole picture from the ground up. While executives worried about class divisions, he saw the common humanity in every passenger he helped. James pulled out the worn photograph of himself and his father standing in front of an early AeroPacific aircraft. The airline's first slogan was visible, dignity in flight. We lost our way for a while, he admitted. Got caught up in the industry's obsession with class division. It took that undercover flight to remind me of what he always knew, that true service means seeing the person, not the ticket class. Maya shared one final document, a passenger comment from that morning. There's something different about AeroPacific. They make you feel human, regardless of where you're sitting. It's like they see the person behind the passenger. As dawn began to break over the airport, James watched the first of the cleaning crew finishing their shifts. Like his father before them, they had cleaned every seat, every space with equal care, understanding that the next day's journeys would carry equal human value, regardless of ticket price. You did it, Dad, he whispered to the quiet terminal. Your dream of dignity for every passenger, it's real now. 4 years to the day after James Chen boarded Flight 2547 in a worn hoodie and scuffed sneakers, he once again stood at Gate A7 in San Francisco International Airport. This time, he was accompanied by a film crew documenting AeroPacific's transformation. For a documentary about changing corporate culture. The gate area buzzed with morning activity, but it was different now. Passengers moved freely through the space, comfortable regardless of their ticket class. The rigid barriers that once divided premium and economy passengers had been replaced by a natural flow based on individual needs rather than status. The remarkable thing, James told the documentary team, isn't just what changed, but what emerged in its place. We didn't just remove barriers, we created connections. As if to illustrate his point, a scene unfolded nearby. A business executive in a premium cabin seat noticed an elderly couple struggling with their carry-on bags. In economy. Without hesitation, he helped them store their luggage, then engaged in friendly conversation about their destination. Sarah, now Global Director of Service Culture, approached with a group of new trainees. "This is where it all began," she told them. 4 years ago, our CEO sat in economy class seat 28F and showed us that dignity isn't a premium product, it's a basic human right. The trainees included crew members from airlines around the world, part of AeroPacific's new mission to spread their philosophy industry-wide. Among them was a young woman whose presence carried special significance, the daughter of the diabetic, passenger from the original flight. "Your handling of my father's medical needs that day changed his life," she told James. "It inspired me to become a flight attendant. Now I'm here to learn how to create that same change in my own airline." Jennifer arrived with the latest passenger satisfaction data, but today's numbers told a different story than mere metrics. "Look at these comments," she said, showing James her tablet. "Passengers aren't just rating our service, they're sharing stories of human connection across cabin classes." The documentary crew interviewed Kevin, who had recently been promoted to Chief of Global Operations. "The most profound change," he reflected, "it's not in our procedures or policies, it's in how we see each passenger. Every interaction is an opportunity to honor someone's journey." Maya joined them, carrying a special piece of airline memorabilia, the original boarding pass from James's Undercover flight. It had been framed and would be displayed in the company's museum alongside other artifacts from their transformation. "But the real artifacts," James told the film crew, "are the thousands of daily interactions that show how deeply our values have taken root." As if on cue, they witnessed a scene that captured the essence of the transformed airline. A premium passenger voluntarily gave up his seat to sit in economy so a mother could stay close to her children. The crew handled the switch smoothly, demonstrating how natural such human-centered decisions had become. The documentary team interviewed passengers about their experiences. A retired teacher shared how she'd been flying with AeroPacific since before the transformation. "The difference isn't just in the service," she explained, "it's in the atmosphere. Everyone, crew and passengers alike, seems more relaxed, more human." A business traveler added his perspective. "I used to choose airlines based on premium perks. Now I choose AeroPacific because they've shown that true luxury isn't about separation from others. It's about being part of a community that values everyone." As the morning progressed, James watched the departure board, noting how many airlines now advertised universal dignity or equal care as part of their service promise. The revolution that began with one undercover flight had grown into an industry-wide movement. Lisa, the flight attendant who had once been part of the first class of new trainees, now led her own crew, with the natural confidence of someone who truly believed in their mission. "We don't just serve passengers anymore," she told the documentary. "Team. We serve their stories." The film crew captured scenes that would have seemed impossible 4 years ago. Premium and economy passengers chatting easily in shared spaces, crew members providing consistent care throughout the aircraft, and a general atmosphere of mutual respect that transcended ticket class. As the morning's flights began boarding, James noticed something that perfectly symbolized their transformation. A young boy in economy was celebrating his first flight, and the entire gate area, premium passengers included, joined in singing "Happy Birthday." It was a moment of spontaneous community that couldn't have happened in the old, divided culture. "You know what the best part is?" James told the documentary team. "This isn't special anymore. This is just who we are now. Every seat carries a story, every journey matters, and every passenger deserves to be treated with dignity." The final scene captured by the film crew showed James boarding Flight 2547 again, this time openly and in his usual business attire. But instead of heading to the premium cabin, he chose seat 28F, the same seat where the transformation began. As the plane taxied for takeoff, James looked out the window at the airport, where his father had once mopped floors and dreamed of an airline that valued every passenger equally. That dream had become reality, not just for AeroPacific, but for an entire industry. The documentary crew's final question was simple. "What's next?" James smiled, watching as crew members moved through the cabin, treating every passenger with genuine care and attention. "This was never about just changing an airline," he replied. "It was about changing how we see each other. That journey never really ends. It just keeps evolving, one flight at a time."